A scream shatters the quiet of Wilbraham Crescent as Sheila Webb stumbles upon a corpse in a stranger's parlor, surrounded by 6 clocks frozen at 4:13. Why are they stopped? Who is the dead man with no name? And where is the blind woman who summoned Sheila to this house of secrets? As Hercule Poirot's brilliant mind untangles a web of murder, espionage, and deception, every tick of the clock pulls you deeper into a chilling puzzle. Is the killer taunting Poirot, or is time itself the enemy? Dive into the clocks where every second counts, and no one is who they seem. Chapter 1. The unexpected corpse. The late summer air in Crowdian clung to the skin like a damp veil, heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine and the faint tang of sea salt drifting from the coast. Sheila Webb, a typist of 23 with a penchant for order and a secret fondness for detective novels, pedaled her bicycle along Wilbraham Crescent, her auburn curls bouncing beneath a straw hat. The Crescent, a tidy arc of Georgian houses, gleamed under the afternoon sun, each residence a mirror of its neighbor, whitewashed walls, black shutters, and manicured gardens whispering of quiet respectability. Number 19, her destination, stood at the far end, its ivy-clad facade giving it an air of genteel secrecy. Sheila glanced at her wristwatch. 2:45 p.m. She was early, as always, for her appointment with Miss Millicent Pedmarsh, a blind woman who had requested a typist through the Cavendish Secretarial Bureau. The job was straightforward transcribing letters, perhaps organizing files, yet Sheila felt a prickle of unease. The agency's note had been oddly vague, mentioning only that Miss Pedmarsh was particular and required discretion. Sheila dismounted, propped her bicycle against a lamp-post, and smoothed her green cotton dress, her fingers lingering on the hem as if to anchor herself. The brass knocker on number 19's door was cold to the touch, its lion's head glaring down at her. She rapped twice, the sound echoing into the stillness of the house. No answer. She waited, her eyes drifting to the window, where heavy curtains blocked any glimpse inside. A second knock yielded the same silence. Frowning, Sheila checked the agency's note again. Enter at 3 p.m. If no response. Door unlocked. Peculiar, but not unheard of for an elderly client with limited mobility. She glanced at her watch, 2:50 p.m. and decided to wait. Leaning against the porch railing, the Crescent was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of a lawn-mower and the chirp of a blackbird perched on a nearby oak. Sheila's gaze wandered to number 18, where a woman in a floral apron was clipping roses, her movements brisk and precise. The woman caught Sheila's eye and offered a tight smile before returning to her task. Sheila felt a flush of self-consciousness, as if she were intruding on the Crescent's unspoken rhythm. At precisely 3 p.m., Sheila turned the doorknob of number 19. It yielded with a soft click, and she stepped into a dim hallway, the air cool and laced with the musty scent of old books and beeswax polish. "Miss Pedmarsh," she called, her voice swallowed by the house's stillness. No reply. She closed the door behind her, her footsteps muffled on a threadbare Persian rug. To her left, A staircase curved upward into shadow. To her right, a parlor door stood ajar, spilling a sliver of light across the floor. Sheila pushed the parlor door open, expecting to find Miss Pedmarsh seated at a desk, perhaps with a braille typewriter. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. A man lay sprawled on the floor, his limbs splayed at unnatural angles, his face turned toward her with sightless eyes. He was middle-aged, clad in a nondescript grey suit, his tie loosened as if he'd been clawing at it in his final moments. Blood pooled beneath his head, dark and viscous, seeping into the oak floorboards. Sheila's scream lodged in her chest, emerging as a choked gasp. Her eyes darted around the room, seeking sense in the chaos. The parlor was a study in contrast, elegant yet cluttered with a velvet chaise longue, a mahogany bookcase stuffed with leather-bound volumes, and a fireplace cold with ash. But what seized her attention were the clocks, 6 of them, each differenter gilded mantel clock, a cuckoo clock with a silent bird, a brass carriage clock, and others lined the mantelpiece and side tables. Every one was stopped at 4:13, their hands frozen in unison, as if time itself had conspired in the man's death. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the doorframe, her mind racing. Was this a prank, a mistake? She forced herself to look at the man again, searching for signs of life. Her twitch, a breath, nothing. His face, pale and slack, bore no expression of pain, only a vacant stillness that made her skin crawl. She backed away, her heel catching on the rug, and stumbled into the hallway, her breath coming in shallow bursts. "Miss Pedmarsh," she shouted, her voice cracking. "Is anyone here?" The house answered with silence, mocking her panic. She fumbled for the front door, desperate for air, for escape. As she yanked it open, she collided with a solid figure, a man in a navy coat, his dark hair tousled, his grey eyes wide with surprise. "Steady on," he exclaimed, catching her arms to keep her from falling. His voice was calm, with a hint, of a northern accent, and his grip was firm but gentle. "What's happened? You're white as a sheet." Sheila stared at him, her words tumbling out in a frantic jumble. "There's a man inside, on the floor, and the clock's stopped. I don't know what's happening." Tears stung her eyes, and she hated herself for them, for the tremble in her voice. The man's expression sharpened, his gaze flicking past her into the house. "Stay here," he said, releasing her and stepping inside. "Don't move." His tone brooked no argument, and Sheila obeyed, sinking onto the porch steps, her hands clasped tightly to still their shaking. The stranger returned minutes later, his face grim. "You're right," he said quietly. "He's dead. I've called the police. They'll be here soon." He crouched beside her, his eyes searching hers. "I'm Colin Lamb. Can you tell me your name and why you're here?" "Sheila Webb," she managed, swallowing hard. "I'm a typist. I was sent to work for Miss Pedmarsh, but she's not here, and I found that." She gestured vaguely toward the house, unwilling to give the horror a name. Colin nodded, his expression softening. "All right, Sheila, you've had a shock. Just breathe and tell me everything you remember from the moment you arrived." haltingly. Sheila recounted her arrival, the unlocked door, the silent house, and the ghastly discovery in the parlor. She described the clocks, their eerie uniformity at 4:13, and Colin's brow furrowed as she spoke. 6 clocks, all stopped. At the same time, he repeated, almost to himself. That's no accident. Before Sheila could ask what he meant, the wail of a siren cut through the air. A police car pulled up, followed by an ambulance, their lights casting red and blue shadows across the crescent. Neighbors emerged, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Bland from number 18, still clutching her pruning shears, and an elderly man from number 20, his spectacles glinting as he peered at the scene. Inspector Hardcastle, a burly man with a moustache that seemed perpetually disapproving, took charge. He listened to Sheila's story, his eyes narrowing as she described the clocks. Odd, very odd, he muttered, scribbling in a notebook. To Colin, he said, "And you, Mr. Lamb, just happened to be passing by." Colin's smile was disarming. "Lucky timing, Inspector. I was on my way to visit a friend in the area when I heard Miss Webb's distress." Hardcastle grunted, unconvinced but distracted by the arrival of a coroner's team. Sheila watched as they entered the house, their voices low and professional, discussing rigor mortis and time of death. She shivered despite the warm air, and Colin draped his coat over her shoulders. "You're doing fine," he said softly. "This isn't your fault." Sheila clung to his words, a lifeline in the chaos. "But why the clocks?" she whispered. "It's like a message." Colin's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something flicker in them, curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. "Maybe it is," he said. "And if it is, we'll figure out what it means." The police cordoned off number 19, and Hardcastle instructed Sheila to remain in Crowdian for questioning. Colin offered to drive her to a nearby cafe, and she'd be accepted, grateful for his steady presence. As they walked to his car, Sheila glanced back at the house, its windows dark and unyielding, as if guarding a secret. In the cafe, over strong tea and stale scones, Sheila began to regain her composure. Colin listened patiently as she spoke of her life, her work at the bureau, her rented room in a boarding house, her love of Agatha Christie novels. "I always thought mysteries were exciting," she said with a wry smile. "Not anymore." Colin chuckled, but his eyes were distant, as if piecing together a puzzle. "This one's got layers," he said. "Through the clocks, the unlocked door, a blind woman who's nowhere to be found. It's like a stage set for a play." Sheila frowned. "You think it was planned. But why me? I'm nobody." "That's what we'll find out," Colin said firmly. "For now, you're safe, and that's what matters." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Wilbraham Crescent in twilight, Colin drove Sheila to her boarding house. He promised to check on her the next day, and she watched his car disappear, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and unease. Alone in her room, she locked the door and sank onto her bed. The image of the dead man and the ticking less clocks burned into her mind. Across town, Colin Lamb sat in his rented flat, a notebook open before him. He wasn't just a passerby. Of course, His work at the nearby naval yard, under the guise of a marine biologist, involved tracking espionage threats, and Number 19's proximity to the yard raised red flags. The clocks, those were personal, a taunt aimed at someone. But who? Miss Pedmarsh, Sheila, or him? He picked up the phone and dialed a London number. "Poirot," he said, when a familiar voice answered. "I've got a case that'll make your grey cells dance. Can I come by tomorrow?" As he hung up, Colin stared out at the night, the weight of the mystery settling over him. The clocks at 4:13 were a riddle, and he was determined to solve it. For now, though Sheila was safe, and that small victory was enough to carry him through the night. The parlour of Number 19 stood silent, the police tape fluttering at the door. In the darkness, the 6 clocks remained, their hands still at 4:13, as if waiting for someone to claim their secret. Chapter 2. The Blind Woman's Denial. The late summer air hung heavy over Crowdian, a sleepy Sussex town where the unexpected rarely stirred the cobblestones. At 19 Wilbraham Crescent, however, the ordinary had shattered like glass. Colin Lamb stood in the neat parlour of Miss Millicent Pedmarsh, his covert agent's instincts prickling as he surveyed the scene. The dead man from yesterday sprawled, lifeless, amid 6 antique clocks, all frozen at 4:13, had left a puzzle that gnawed at him. Sheila Webb, the typist, who'd stumbled upon the corpse, was still shaken, her wide eyes haunting Colin as he'd left her with the constable to recover. Now, with Inspector Dick Hardcastle at his side, Colin faced the blind woman who owned this house, seeking answers to a crime that felt like a taunt. Miss Pedmarsh sat ramrod straight in a high-backed chair, her hands folded over a simple grey skirt. Her sightless eyes, hidden behind dark glasses, gave nothing away, but her voice carried a crisp authority. "I assure you, gentlemen, I did not request a typist. I have no need for such services." Her tone was measured, almost too precise, as if rehearsed. Hardcastle, a stocky man with a penchant for straightforward questions, leaned forward, notebook in hand. "Miss Pedmarsh, you're saying you never contacted the Cavendish Secretarial Bureau? Not even for a one-off job?" "Never." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I manage my correspondence independently. Braille typewriter, you see. Quite efficient." Colin's gaze drifted to the corner of the room, where a sturdy, black typewriter sat on a small desk, its keys embossed with raised dots. The parlour itself was austere-polished wooden floors, a single bookshelf with neatly arranged volumes, and a faint scent of lavender polish. No clutter, no excess, and certainly no sign of the 6 clocks that had surrounded the dead man yesterday. Those had been whisked away to the station for analysis, their ticking silenced but their mystery still loud. "And the clocks?" Colin asked, keeping his voice neutral. "You're certain none of them belong to you?" Miss Pedmarsh's head tilted slightly, as if gauging his intent. "I have 1 clock, Mr. Lamb, a simple mantelpiece model, set to chime the hour. Those others 6, you say, are not mine. I would have no use for such extravagance." Hardcastle scribbled a note, his pen scratching audibly. Yet the body was found in your sitting room, Miss Pebb. A man, middle-aged, no identification. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Odd. Her voice sharpened, though her face remained composed. It's outrageous. An invasion of my home. I was out yesterday afternoon, visiting a friend. I returned to find my house crawling with police. If I had answers, Inspector, I would give them. Colin studied her, searching for a crack in her composure. Her story held up too well, perhaps. A blind woman, living alone, would surely notice something amiss in her carefully ordered world. Yet she claimed ignorance of both the typist and the clocks. He glanced at Hardcastle, who gave a slight nod, signaling he'd caught the same undercurrent of unease. Where were you between 2 and 4 yesterday afternoon? Colin asked, stepping closer to the fireplace, where the single clock she mentioned ticked softly. At Mrs. Curtin's, 3 streets over. We take tea every Tuesday. She can confirm it. Miss Pedmarsh's fingers twitched, the first sign of agitation. I left at 1:30 and returned just after 4. The police were already here. Colin made a mental note to verify her alibi. Mrs. Curtin's name was a start, but something about Miss Pedmarsh's precision nagged at him. Blind or not, she navigated her world with uncanny certainty. Could she have missed a stranger's presence in her home, or was she hiding something? Hardcastle closed his notebook with a snap. We'll check with Mrs. Curtin. In the meantime, Miss Pedmarsh, we'll need you to stay available. This is a murder investigation. After all, murder. Her voice dipped, a flicker of surprise, or was it calculation, crossing her face. I assumed it was an accident. A heart attack, perhaps. No accident, Hardcastle said bluntly. The man was stabbed. Clean wound, straight to the heart. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. Miss Pedmarsh's hands tightened in her lap. How dreadful, she murmured. But her tone lacked the tremor Colin expected from a woman learning her home had been a murder scene. He filed that away, his mind already racing toward the next question, as they stepped outside. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Wilbraham Crescent. The street was quiet, its semi-detached houses exuding middle-class respectability. Yet Colin couldn't shake the feeling that 19 held secrets beyond its prim exterior. Hardcastle lit a cigarette, exhaling a plume of smoke. She's hiding something, he said, echoing Colin's thoughts. No one's that calm about a corpse in their parlor. Maybe, Colin replied, his eyes scanning the neighboring houses. Curtains twitched at 18, and he made a note to speak with the occupants later. But if she's lying, she's good at it. Too good, Hardcastle grunted. Blind or not, she's sharp. Did you catch her pause when you mentioned the clocks? Colin nodded, like she was choosing her words. Let's dig into her background. Old habits, routines, anything that might explain why her house was chosen for this display. They parted ways, Hardcastle heading to the station to coordinate with the forensics team, while Colin lingered on the Crescent. His cover as a marine biologist kept his true role special intelligence operative hidden. But this case was blurring the lines between his covert work and this bizarre murder. The naval yard, just a mile away, was under scrutiny for a missing code book, and Colin couldn't ignore the possibility of a connection. A dead man, 6 clocks, a blind woman's denial. It felt like a riddle designed to mock him. He pulled out his notebook, jotting down the details. Miss Pedmarsh, alibi with Mrs. Curtin, claims no knowledge of typist or clocks. House too orderly for a random crime. Clocks set to 4:13. Why? He underlined the last question twice. The time was too specific to be arbitrary. A signal, a signature. He needed more data, and he knew exactly who could make sense of this chaos. By evening, Colin was in London, navigating bustle of Charing Cross Road. The city's pulse was a stark contrast to Crowdion's stillness, and it sharpened his focus. He climbed the narrow stairs to Hercule Poirot's flat, the faint aroma of cocoa greeting him as he knocked. The door opened to reveal Poirot's valet, George, who ushered him inside with a polite nod. "Monsieur Lamb, a pleasure, as always." Hercule Poirot rose from an armchair, his small frame immaculate in a pinstriped suit. His eyes, bright and inquisitive, gleamed with anticipation. "You bring me a puzzle, I trust. My little grey cells, they grow restless." Colin grinned, settling into a plush chair. "A puzzle, all right. A dead man, 6 clocks, and a blind woman who claims she knows nothing. It's theatrical." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Theatrical, bon. I adore a crime with flair. Tell me everything, mon ami, and spare no detail." Colin recounted the events at Wilbraham Crescent, from Sheila's discovery to Miss Pedmarsh's denial. He described the clocks on it, expensive and out of place in the Spartan house. Poirot listened, his fingers steepled, his expression one of rapt attention. When Colin mentioned the 4:13 setting, Poirot's eyes narrowed. 4:13, he murmured. "A time so precise, it screams intention. But what? A message, a distraction. We must consider the psychology of the criminal. Colin, this is no ordinary murder." Colin leaned forward. "That's what I thought. Miss Pedmarsh's story is too neat. She's blind, yes, but her house is meticulous. If someone planted a body and 6 clocks, how did she not notice anything amiss?" Poirot tapped his temple. "The mind, it notices what the eyes cannot. A blind woman, she relies on sound, touch, smell. A stranger in her home would disrupt her order. Yet she claims ignorance. Either she is truthful, or she is a liar of exceptional skill." "Hardcastle thinks she's hiding something," Colin said. "I'm inclined to agree. But why her house? And why the clocks?" Poirot's smile was almost mischievous. "This crime, it is like a novel too complicated, and thus it must be quite simple. The clocks, they are a flourish, a misdirection. The true motive lies elsewhere. Tell me, what do you know of this Miss Pedmarsh?" "Not much yet. She's lived in Crowdion for years, keeps to herself. No family, no visitors, except this Mrs. Curtin for tea. I'll check her alibi tomorrow. Bean, and the typist, Mademoiselle Webb. She is innocent, you think?" Colin hesitated, picturing Sheila's pale face, her trembling hands. She was terrified, ran straight into me when she fled the house. I don't think she's involved, but she's shaken. I'll keep an eye on her. Poirot's gaze softened. You are protective of her, Nan. Be careful, mon ami. The heart, it can cloud the mind. Colin flushed but didn't argue. Instead, he steered the conversation back to the case. What do you make of the clocks? 6 of them, all set to the same time. It's not random. No, it is not random. Poirot rose, pacing slowly. The number 6, the time for 13, they are symbols, perhaps, or a code. In my experience, such theatrics serve to hide a mundane truth. Greed, revenge, fear, these are the roots of murder. The clocks, they distract from the why. Colin nodded, his mind already turning over possibilities. I'll dig into the clock's origins. They're antiques, not cheap. Someone went to trouble to place them there. Excellent. Poirot clapped his hands. You will be my eyes and ears, Colin. Bring me the details, the neighbors, the victim, the typist's agency. I shall remain here in my armchair, and let my little grey cells unravel this knot. Colin stood, feeling a spark of optimism. Poirot's confidence was infectious, and the prospect of cracking the case with him was exhilarating. I'll head back to Crowdian tonight. Anything specific you want me to look for? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Everything, mon ami. But start with the blind woman's routine. Her denial. It is too perfect. There is a discrepancy. I feel it. Find it, and we shall have our first thread to pull. Back in Crowdian, the night was thick with mist, the street lamps casting hazy halos. Colin parked his car a block from Wilbraham Crescent, preferring to approach on foot. The town felt different now, its quiet laced with menace. He passed No. 19, its windows dark, and paused at the gate. A faint sound, a rustle, perhaps came from the garden. He froze, hand on his pocket-knife, but nothing moved, just the wind. He told himself, but his pulse didn't slow. At the station, he found Hardcastle hunched over a desk, surrounded by reports. Anything new? Colin asked, dropping into a chair. Forensics says the clocks are clean, no prints, no maker's marks. Like they were wiped down deliberately. Hardcastle rubbed his eyes. The victim's still a John Doe. No matches in our records. But we got a lead on the murder weaponer narrow blade. Possibly a letter opener. Common enough, but we're checking local shops. Colin frowned. A letter opener, that's personal. You don't stab someone in the heart with a letter opener, unless you're close, physically or emotionally, or desperate, Hardcastle added. I sent a constable to Mrs. Curtin's. She confirms Miss Pebmarsh was there from 1:30 to 4. Alibi holds. For now. Colin tapped his notebook. Too neat. I want to talk to Mrs. Curtin myself, and the neighbors. Someone saw something. Hardcastle nodded. Start with No. 18. Mrs. Bland's been nosy. Kept asking questions when we were canvassing. Might know more than she's letting on. Colin made a note, then hesitated. What about Sheila Webb? She's safe, right? At her lodging, with a constable outside. She's rattled but cooperative. Said she'd never been to know. 19 before yesterday. The agency's checking their records to see who placed the call for her. Good. Colin stood, his mind already on the next steps. I'll check the Crescent tomorrow, and I'm bringing in an old friend to consult Hercule Poirot. Hardcastle raised an eyebrow. The Belgian detective. Bit theatrical, isn't he? He's the best, Colin said simply. If anyone can make sense of those clocks, it's him. The next morning, Colin knocked on Mrs. Curtin's door, a modest terraced house on Laurel Street. She was a wiry woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a nervous habit of smoothing her apron. "Millicent's in trouble, isn't she?" she said, ushering him inside. "I told her that house was too big for one person, blind or not. She's not in trouble," Colin said carefully. "We're just verifying her whereabouts. You had tea with her Tuesday afternoon." "Oh, yes. 1:30 sharp, like always. She brought her lemon biscuits, dreadful things, but I don't complain. Left about 4, maybe a bit before. She's particular about time. Millicent is." Colin nodded, noting the consistency. "Did she seem off? Worried about anything?" Mrs. Curtin frowned, her hands stilling. "Now you mention it. She was quieter than usual. Kept checking her watch, the one that talks. Said she had to get home for a delivery, but she didn't say what. A delivery." Colin's pulse quickened. "Did she mention anyone new in her life? Visitors? Phone calls?" "No, nothing like that. Millicent's private. Keeps her own counsel." Mrs. Curtin hesitated, then lowered her voice. "But I heard her on the phone last week when I popped by unannounced. She sounded cross, like she was arguing. Hung up quick when she heard me." Colin thanked her and left, his mind buzzing. An argument, a delivery, a blind woman who noticed nothing amiss in a house staged with a corpse and 6 clocks. The pieces didn't fit yet. He headed to Wilbraham Crescent, determined to speak with Mrs. Bland at No. 18. Her curtains had twitched yesterday, and nosy neighbors often saw more than they realized. Mrs. Bland was a plump, cheerful woman with a penchant for gossip. She invited Colin in with a flurry of apologies about the state of her sitting room, though it was spotless. Put such a dreadful business at No. 19, she said, pouring tea. Poor Millicent, all alone in that big house. I saw the police there yesterday. They find out who the man was. Not yet, Colin said, accepting a cup. You live next door. Notice anything unusual Monday or Tuesday? She leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Well, I don't like to pry, but I did see a man lurking near No. 19 on Monday evening. Tall, dark coat, hat pulled low. Looked shifty, if you ask me. Colin's pen paused. Can you describe him? Did he go inside? Didn't see him. Go in, but he was by the gate for a good 10 minutes. Then he walked off toward the high street. I told my husband, that's no delivery man. Too furtive. Colin jotted down the description, his mind racing. A stranger near No. 19, the day before the murder. It wasn't much, but it was a thread. He thanked Mrs. Bland and stepped outside, the crescent quiet under the morning sun. The case was growing. Thorns. But Poirot's words echoed in his mind. The truth lies in human nature, not the clocks. He needed to see Sheila again, to confirm her story and ensure her safety. But first, he'd visit the Cavendish Secretarial Bureau. Someone had summoned Sheila to No. 19, and that call was the key to unraveling Miss Pedmarsh's denial. As he walked to his car, a shadow moved behind a hedge across the street. He spun, a hand on his knife, but the crescent was empty. Just the wind, he told himself again. But this time he wasn't so sure. At the bureau, a cramped office above a bakery. Miss Martindale, the manager, was flustered but cooperative. "I took the call myself," she said, flipping through a ledger. "A woman said she was Miss Pedmarsh, wanted a typist for 2 o'clock Tuesday. Gave the address, clear as day." "Did you recognize her voice?" Colin asked, leaning against the desk. "No, but I wouldn't. We get dozens of calls." She sounded ordinary, polite, clipped, like she was reading from a script. Colin's jaw tightened. "Can you check if you've had other jobs for No. 19? Miss Martindale scanned her records, then shook her head. "Nothing. First time we've had a request from that address." Colin thanked her and left, the scent of fresh bread mingling with his frustration. An impostor had lured Sheila to the house, but why? To frame Miss Pedmarsh, to ensure the body was found. He needed to talk to Sheila, to see if she'd remembered anything new. And he needed to get back to Poirot with these threads, the stranger. The phone call, the delivery. By noon, he was at Sheila's lodging, a modest boarding house on the edge of Crowdian. She answered the door, her face pale but composed. "Colin," she said, relief softening her voice. "I thought you'd forgotten about me." "Never," he said, managing a smile. "How are you holding up?" She led him to a small sitting room, her hands twisting together. "I keep seeing him. Man, the clocks. Why me? Why was I sent there? That's what I'm trying to figure out." Colin sat across from her, noting the shadows under her eyes. The call to the bureau wasn't from Miss Pedmarsh. Someone pretended to be her. "Did you notice anything else in the house? Anything out of place?" She frowned, thinking. It was so tidy, except for the clocks and the body. She shuddered. But there was a smell, faint like perfume, not lavender, something sharper. "I didn't think about it then. I was too scared." "Perfume." Colin's pen moved quickly. "Anything else? A sound, a detail?" She hesitated. "There was a creak, like a floorboard, just before I saw the body. I thought it was the house settling, but now, maybe someone was there." Colin's pulse quickened. A creak, a perfume, a stranger in a dark coat. The threads were multiplying, but they still didn't form a pattern. He reached for Sheila's hand, a gesture of reassurance that felt more personal than he intended. "You're safe now. I've got a constable outside, and I'm not letting anything happen to you." She squeezed his hand, her eyes searching his. "Thank you, Colin. I don't know what I'd do without you." He left her with a promise to check in later, his mind a tangle of clues and instincts. Miss Pedmarsh's denial was the keystone, but it was starting to crack. The stranger, the impostor, the perfume, they pointed to a setup, but for what purpose? As he drove back to London, the clocks ticked in his mind, their hands frozen at 4:13, daring him to uncover their meaning. Poirot was waiting, and Colin had a feeling the little Belgian would see something he'd missed. In Poirot's flat, the cocoa was fresh, and the detective's eyes were alight with curiosity. Colin laid out the new details: Mrs. Curtin's confirmation, Mrs. Bland's stranger, the impostor's call, Sheila's perfume and creak. Poirot listened, his fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the armrest. The perfume. It is significant, he said at last. A woman's touch, perhaps, in a crime so carefully staged, and a creak someone lingered, watching Mademoiselle Webb discover the body. This is no accident, Colin. This is a performance. A performance. Colin frowned. You think the killer wanted Sheila to find the body precisely? The clocks, the corpse, the precise time, they are props in a play. But for whose benefit? The blind woman, she is either a victim or a director. Her denial, it is too perfect, as you say. I want you to watch her, Colin. Her routine, her visitors. There is a discrepancy, a moment where her story falters. Find it. Colin nodded, the weight of the case settling on his shoulders. I'll start tomorrow. I'm also checking the neighbors, the bureau's records, and the clock's origins. Anything else? Poirot's smile was sly. Be cautious, mon ami. This killer, they are clever. They play with time, with perceptions, but they cannot outwit the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. As Colin left, the city's lights blurred into streaks, mirroring the chaos in his mind. Miss Pedmarsh's denial was a wall, but walls had cracks. He'd find them, for Sheila, for the nameless victim, and for the truth that hid behind those ticking hands. The case was a labyrinth, but with Poirot's guidance, he was ready to navigate it. Chapter 3. Poirot's armchair challenged the late afternoon sun, slanted through the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting golden bars across the polished parquet floor. The room was a study in meticulous order. A gleaming mahogany desk anchored one corner, its surface bare save for a single silver inkstand. Bookshelves lined the walls, their volumes arranged by size and color, and a pair of emerald-green armchairs flanked a low table, where a delicate porcelain teapot steamed gently. Poirot himself, diminutive yet commanding, sat in one of these chairs, his patent leather shoes catching the light as he crossed one leg over the other. His moustache, waxed to perfection, twitched slightly as he gazed at the young man pacing before him. Colin Lamb was a stark contrast to the room's serenity. His dark hair was slightly dishevelled, his tie askew, and his eyes burned with a restless energy. He clutched a notebook, its pages dog-eared and scribbled with hasty notes about the peculiar crime at 19 Wilbraham Crescent. The dead man. The 6 clocks set to 4:13. The blind Miss Pedmarsh's baffling denial lit was a tangle of contradictions that had brought him here. To the one man he knew could unravel such a knot, "Mon ami Poirot," said, his voice smooth as velvet, "you must cease this marching. It disturbs the order of my thoughts. Sit and tell Poirot everything slowly, precisely." Colin halted mid-stride, exhaling sharply. "I'm sorry, Poirot. It's just this case. It's like trying to grab fog. Nothing makes sense." He sank into the opposite armchair, flipping open his notebook. "I need your help. I'm out of my depth." Poirot's green eyes gleamed with interest. "A case that perplexes the capable Colin Lamb. This is most intriguing. Begin at the beginning, if you please." Colin recounted the events with practiced clarity. Sheila Webb's discovery of the corpse, the clock's eerie uniformity, Miss Pebmarsh's insistence that she neither requested a typist nor owned the timepieces, and the unsettling calm of the crime scene. He described the victim middle-aged, nondescript, with no identification, the lingering sense that the clocks were not merely props, but a deliberate challenge. Poirot listened without interruption, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When Colin finished, a slow smile curved the detective's lips. "Magnifique," he murmured. "This crime, it is so complicated, it must be quite simple." Colin blinked. "Simple? Poirot, there's a dead man, 6 mystery clocks, and a blind woman who might be lying through her teeth. How is that simple?" Poirot raised a hand, his gold signet ring catching the light. "The complexity, mon ami, is the illusion. The criminal wishes us to see chaos, to drown in details. But beneath this chaos lies a single truth, clear as crystal. We must find it." Colin leaned forward, his skepticism warring with hope. "And you think you can do that from here?" He gestured at the room, with its cozy elegance and utter remove from the gritty streets of Crowdian. Poirot's smile widened. "Mais oui. The little grey cells, they require no travel. The mind, Colin, is the greatest battlefield. I shall solve this case from my armchair, with only the facts you bring me and the logic of human nature to guide me. This is my challenge, and I accept it with delight." Colin couldn't help but grin. Poirot's confidence was infectious, a beacon in the murk of the case. "All right, then. Where do we start?" Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, as Biff savouring a fine wine with the clocks. "They are the heart of this puzzle. 6 clocks, all set to 4:13. Why? What does this time signify? Is it a message, a warning, a distraction? Tell me, Colin, what strikes you about them?" Colin frowned, flipping through his notes. "They're all different, mix French, German, English, but high quality, not cheap trinkets. Someone went to the trouble of collecting them, setting them, placing them around the body. It feels theatrical precisement." Poirot's finger jabbed the air. "Theatricality implies intent. The clocks are not random. They are a performance. But for whom? The police, Miss Pebmarsh, Sheila Webb, or perhaps for someone yet unknown." Colin jotted this down, his pen scratching furiously. So you think the clocks are symbolic? Symbolism, yes. But of what? Poirot's gaze drifted to the mantel, where his own clocker, sleek Art Deco, paced it softly. Time is universal, yet personal. It marks births, deaths, appointments, betrayals. 4:13 could be a moment of significance to the victim, the killer, or both. Or it could be a red herring, meant to waste our energies. Colin rubbed his temples. That's the problem. Every lead feels like it could be a trap. Then we must be cleverer than the trapper, Poirot said firmly. Let us consider the players. Sheila Webb, her reaction. It was genuine. Colin nodded. She was terrified. Nearly fainted when she saw the body. I don't think she's acting. And yet, Poirot mused, she is the one who found the corpse. Coincidence or design? The killer ensured she would be at Wilbraham Crescent. Why her? Colin's jaw tightened. He'd been asking himself the same question, haunted by Sheila's pale face and trembling hands. The agency said the request came by phone, asking for Sheila specifically. But Miss Pebmarsh swears she made no such call. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A third party, then. Someone who knew Sheila's schedule, her habits. This suggests intimacy or surveillance. You must learn more about Mademoiselle Webb, her friends, her enemies, her secrets. Colin hesitated, an unfamiliar protectiveness stirring. She's just a typist, Poirot. A girl caught in the wrong place. Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone was unyielding. No one is just anything, mon ami. Every soul carries shadows. You must look into hers, without sentiment. Colin nodded reluctantly, scribbling another note. What about Miss Pebmarsh? She's blind, but sharp as a tack. Her house is spotless, her routine rigid. But there's something off. She mentioned leaving the house at 2:30 that day. But a neighbor saw her return closer to 3 o'clock. That gap bothers me. Poirot's moustache twitched. A discrepancy, however small, is a crack in the facade. Blindness does not equate to helplessness. Miss Pebmarsh may be more involved than she appears. You will verify her movements, her connections, and the neighbors tell me of them. Colin flipped a page. The Blands, next door at No. 18, seem ordinary. He's a builder, she's a housewife. Chatty, eager to help, but nothing concrete. Mr. Ramsay at No. 20 is quieter, travels a lot for work. The rest are families or elderly. No obvious red flags. Poirot tapped his fingers on the armrest. Ordinary is often the best disguise. Barnes' eagerness. Perhaps it masks curiosity or guilt. Mr. Ramsay's absences convenient for a man with secrets. You must observe them, Colin. Watch their eyes, their hands. The body speaks what the tongue conceals. Colin sighed, overwhelmed by the possibilities. This feels like chasing ghosts. What if we're missing the obvious? Poirot's expression grew grave. The obvious is what the killer wants us to see. The clocks, the corpse, they are the stage dressing. We must look behind the curtain. Tell me, what was the room like? Beyond the clocks, what did you notice? Colin closed his eyes, picturing No. 19's sitting room. It was tidy, almost sterile. Floral curtains, a worn sofa, a fireplace with no ash. The body was on a rug. No blood, no signs of a struggle, just peaceful, except for those damn clocks. Poirot leaned forward, his voice low. Peaceful, you say? A murder without violence is rare. This suggests planning, precision. The victim, was he surprised, or did he know his fate? Colin shook his head. No way to tell yet. No wounds, no marks. Hardcastle's waiting on the autopsy. Then we wait, Poirot said, but not idly. You will return to Crowdian and gather these things. The victim's clothing, every detailed fabric, wear, labels, the exact placement of the clock straw. A mat, if you must, and Sheila Webb's background, her life before this day. These are the threads we will weave. Colin nodded, his resolve hardening. I'll get it done. But Poirot, why do I feel like we're playing the killer's game? Poirot's smile returned, tinged with mischief. Because we are, mon ami. But Hercule Poirot does not lose at games of the mind. Go now, and bring me the pieces of this puzzle. I shall be here, thinking, always thinking. Colin rose, tucking his notebook away. I'll be back as soon as I can. Thanks, Poirot. I knew you'd see something I couldn't. Poirot waved a hand dismissively. Flattery is unnecessary. Results are what matter. Bon courage, Colin Lamb. As Colin stepped into the crisp London evening, the weight of the case settled on his shoulders. Poirot's words echoed in his mind, simple beneath the complex. A performance, a single truth. He hailed a cab, his thoughts racing. Crowdian awaited with its secrets and shadows. He'd dig until he found what Poirot needed, no matter how deep the lies were buried. Back in the flat, Poirot poured himself a tisane, the steam curling like a question mark. He settled into his armchair, his eyes fixed on the ticking mantel clock. 4:13. The number danced in his mind, a cipher begging to be cracked. He closed his eyes, letting the little grey cells begin their silent work. The next morning, Colin stood in the police station at Crowdian, a cup of tepid coffee in hand. Inspector Hardcastle, a burly man with a perpetually furrowed brow, was sorting through a pile of reports. The autopsy results had come in, and Colin was eager for answers. Morning. Lamb, Hardcastle grunted. Your man's a mystery. No cause of death, yet heart stopped. But no poison, no trauma. Like he just gave up. Colin frowned. That's impossible. Nobody dies for no reason. Hardcastle shrugged. Pathologists stumped. Where? Running more tests. Got his clothes bagged, though. Want a look? Colin nodded, following Hardcastle to the evidence room. The victim's suit was laid out on a table. Grey wool, well tailored, but worn at the cuffs. The shirt was crisp, the tie a muted blue. Colin checked the pockets empty, save for a single lint-covered mint. Labels. He asked, British make, off the rack. Hardcastle said, nothing custom, could belong to half the men in England. Colin jotted this down, disappointed but not surprised. He sketched the suit's details for Poirot, noting the frayed hems and a faint stain on the sleeve grease. Perhaps. What about the clocks? Any prints? Hardcastle shook his head. Clean as a whistle. Whoever set them wore gloves. We're checking local shops, but 6 antiques like that. Not a quick purchase. Colin's mind flashed to Poirot's words. Theatricality, intent. I need to map their positions. Can I see the crime scene photos? Hardcastle handed over a folder. The images showed the sitting room from every angle, the clocks stark against the muted decor. Colin traced their placements. 1 on the mantel, 2 on a side table, 1 by the window, 1 near the door, 1 at the victim's feet. He drew a rough diagram, marking distances and angles. It felt like a constellation, but the pattern eluded him. "Thanks, Hardcastle," he said, tucking the photos away. "I'm heading to the typing agency next. Need to dig into Sheila's background." Hardcastle raised an eyebrow. "Think she's mixed up in this?" "I hope not," Colin said, his voice tight. "But I can't rule it out." The typing agency was a cramped office above a bakery, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread. Miss Martindale, the manager, was a wiry woman with a nonsense air. She peered at Colin over her spectacles, her fingers drumming on a ledger. "Sheila's one of my best girls," she said. "Punctual, reliable, never a complaint. That call requesting hurt came Wednesday, late afternoon." Woman's voice, clipped, said it was for Miss Pebmarsh at Wilbraham Crescent. Colin leaned forward. "Did she give a name?" "No. Just the address and times. I thought it odd, but clients don't always explain." Miss Martindale hesitated. "Sheila was shaken when she came back yesterday. Kept saying she'd never seen a dead man before. Poor. Things been jumpy since." Colin's chest tightened. "Any enemies? Anyone who'd want to scare her?" Miss Martindale shook her head. "Not that I know. She's quiet, keeps to herself. Lives in a boarding house on Elm Street. You could ask her landlady." Colin thanked her and left his notebook filling with questions. Sheila's innocence seemed genuine, but Poirot was right. Nobody was just anything. He needed to know her past, her connections. The boarding house was his next stop. Elm Street was a row of tidy Victorian houses, their gardens bursting with late summer roses. Sheila's landlady, Mrs. Curtis, was a plump woman with a warm smile. She invited Colin in, offering tea and biscuits. "Sheila's a dear," Mrs. Curtis said, pouring from a chipped teapot. "Been here 2 years. Never late on rent. She's out now, went to visit her aunt, I think. Such a shock what happened yesterday." Colin sipped the tea, masking his impatience. "Does she have visitors? Friends?" "Not many. A girl from the agency sometimes. Edna something. No gentleman, if that's what you mean." Mrs. Curtis frowned. "She got a letter last week, though. Looked upset after reading it. Burned it in the grate." Colin's pulse quickened. "Did you see who it was from?" "No, but the envelope was fancy-crested paper, like from a solicitor." "She didn't say a word about it." Colin made a note to follow up on the letter. A solicitor's crest could mean anything in debt, a warning. He thanked Mrs. Curtis and stepped outside, the sun dipping low. His diagram of the clocks burned in his pocket, along with Poirot's challenge: find the truth behind the performance. That evening, Colin phoned Poirot from a crowded pub, the clink of glasses and laughter fading as he shut himself in a booth. "I've got the clothes, the clock map, and some on Sheila," he said, relaying the day's findings. Poirot's voice crackled through the line, vibrant with excitement. "Excellent, mon ami. The clothes ordinary, yes, but the grease stain. It suggests a trade, perhaps mechanical. The clock's placement random, or a code. I must study your map. And Sheila's letter burned, you say? This is most suggestive. She hides something, this girl." Colin gripped the receiver. "I'm meeting her tomorrow. I'll ask about the letter, gently." "Gently, yes, but firmly," Poirot said. "And the neighbors, Colin. Watch them. The killer is close. I feel it. The clocks tick not for the victim, but for us." Colin hung up, Poirot's words a drumbeat. In his mind, the case was a labyrinth, but with Poirot's guidance, he felt the walls beginning to shift. Tomorrow, he'd face Sheila, chase the letter's ghost, and stare into the neighbor's eyes. The truth was out there, waiting to be seized in his flat. Poirot spread Colin's diagram on his desk, the clock placements stark under the lamplight. He traced the lines, murmuring to himself, 4:13. A moment frozen, a challenge issued. But to whom? He sipped his tisane, the puzzle unfolding in his mind like a flower. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot was ready to play. Chapter 4. The nameless victim's late summer sun hung low over Crowdian, casting long shadows across Wilbraham Crescent. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint tanks of salt from the distant sea. Colin Lamb stood, outside, no, 19, his hands thrust deep into the pockets of his overcoat, his dark eyes scanning the quiet street. The house, with its neatly trimmed hedge and unassuming brick facade, seemed to mock the chaos that had unfolded within its walls just days ago. A dead man, 6 clocks frozen at 4:13, and a typist named Sheila Webb, who had stumbled into a nightmare. The scene replayed in Colin's mind, vivid and unsettling, like a film reel stuck on a single, jarring frame. Inspector Hardcastle emerged from the house, his broad shoulders slumping slightly under the weight of the investigation. His face, weathered by years of chasing truths through the fog of human deceit, bore a grimace. "No luck inside," he said, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "The lads have gone over every inch of that room. Not a fingerprint, not a stray hair. Whoever set this up was meticulous." Colin nodded, his jaw tightening. "Too meticulous. It's not just Cleanettes staged. Those clocks, the body, even Sheila's presence. Someone wanted us to find this exactly as it was." Hardcastle raised an eyebrow. "You're sounding like that friend of yours, the one with the moustache, and the grand theories." "Hercule Poirot," Colin said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "He'd say, 'This is a puzzle designed to dazzle us. But puzzles have pieces, and we're missing the most important one. Who the devil is our victim? The two men crossed the street to the police van, where a constable handed Hardcastle a thin file. "Preliminary report from the coroner," the young officer said, his voice tinged with unease. "Not much to go on, sir." Hardcastle flipped open the file, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the sparse details. Male, mid-40s, well-dressed. No identification, no wallet, no keys. Cause of death, strangulation, likely with a thin cord or wire. Time of death estimated between 2 o'clock and 3 p.m. yesterday. He paused, holding up a small evidence bag. Inside was a scrap of paper, crumpled and slightly torn, with the letters RF scrawled in black ink. This was in his coat pocket. "Mean anything to you, Lamb?" Colin took the bag, turning it over in his hands. The paper was cheap, the kind you'd find in a notepad from any corner shop. The handwriting was hurried, almost illegible, as if written in a moment of desperation. "RF," he murmured. "Initials. A code. Could be anything or nothing." Hardcastle said gruffly, "People stuff all sorts of rubbish in their pockets. Train tickets, shopping, lists, you name it." Colin shook his head. Not this man. His suit was tailored, his shoes polished. He wasn't the type to carry rubbish. This was left for a reason. Hardcastle sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You and your reasons. Fine. Let's say it's a clue. Where do we start?" Colin glanced down the street, where a few neighbors lingered behind their curtains, their curiosity barely concealed. "We start with the people who saw him. Someone on this crescent knows more than they're letting on. The first door they knocked on belonged to No. 18, home of Mrs. Marjorie Bland and her husband, James. The Blands were a middle-aged couple, unremarkable at first glance, with a tidy house that smelled faintly of lavender, polish, and overcooked cabbage. Mrs. Bland, a plump woman with tightly permed hair and a nervous smile, ushered them into a sitting room cluttered with doilies and porcelain figurines. "Such a dreadful business," she said, wringing her hands as she perched on the edge of a floral sofa. "I couldn't sleep a wink last night, thinking of that poor man next door, and Miss Pebmarsh, of all people, caught up in it. She's such a quiet soul." Hardcastle pulled out his notebook, his pencil poised. "Mrs. Bland, did you notice by anything unusual yesterday? Any strangers around? No. 19, perhaps?" Mrs. Bland's eyes darted to her husband, who sat silently in an armchair, his face buried in a newspaper. "Well," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I did see someone, a man, loitering near Miss Pebmarsh's gate around noon. He wasn't from around here, I'm sure of it. He had a shifty look about him." Colin leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Can you describe him?" Mrs. Bland hesitated, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. "He was tall, I think. Dark coat, hat pulled low. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he seemed out of place, like he didn't belong." James Bland lowered his newspaper, his voice gruff. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Marjorie. Probably just a delivery man or some such. People come and go all the time." Mrs. Bland shot her husband a sharp look. I know what I saw, James, and I'm telling these gentlemen because it might be important." Colin exchanged a glance with Hardcastle. Mrs. Bland's story was vague, but her unease was palpable. "Thank you, Mrs. Bland," he said. "If you remember anything else, no matter how small, please let us know." As they stepped back onto the street, Hardcastle muttered, "Shifty man in a dark coat. That's about as useful as a screen door on a submarine." Colin smirked. "It's a start. She's rattled, though. Did you notice how she looked at her husband? Like she was afraid he'd contradict her." Hardcastle grunted. "Or maybe she's just prone to dramatics. Let's try the other neighbors before we start spinning yarns." The next house, no, 20, belonged to Mr. Angus Ramsay, a widower, his late 50s, who worked as a traveling salesman. His home was sparsely furnished, with a faint air of neglect-us on the mantelpiece, a pile of unopened letters on the hall table. Ramsay himself was a wiry man with deep-set eyes and a guarded demeanor. He stood in his doorway, arms crossed, as if daring them to ask too many questions. "I wasn't home yesterday," he said flatly, before Hardcastle could even open his mouth. "Got back from a business trip late last night. Didn't hear about trouble until this morning." Colin studied Ramsay's face, noting the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Where were you traveling from, Mr. Ramsay?" "Portsmouth," he replied, a touch too quickly. "Selling machine parts to the factory down there. Left Monday, back Thursday. You can check with my employer if you like." "We might," Hardcastle said, scribbling in his notebook. "Anyone else live here who might have seen something?" Ramsay shook his head. "Just me. My boys are grown. Moved out years ago. I keep to myself." As they turned to leave, Colin glanced back at Ramsay, who was already closing the door. Something about the man's brisk dismissal nagged at him, like a note played slightly off-key in an otherwise familiar tune. "He's hiding something," Colin said as they walked back. "Prit to the van." Hardcastle snorted. "Or he's just a grumpy old sod who doesn't like coppers sniffing around. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, lamb." The breakthrough came later that afternoon, at a small antique shop tucked away on Crowdion's High Street. The shop, called Tick-Tock Treasures, was a maze of polished wood and gleaming brass, its shelves crowded with clocks of every shape and size. The air hummed with the soft, relentless ticking of 100 timepieces, a sound that set Colin's nerves on edge. The shop's owner, Mr. Ezra Finch, was a stooped man in his 70s, with a shock of white hair and a pair of half-moon spectacles perched on his nose. He greeted them with a warm smile, his hands clasped behind his back, as if welcoming old friends. "Officers," he said, his voice soft but clear. "I heard about the trouble up at Wilbraham Crescent. Terrible thing. How can I help?" Colin produced a photograph of one of the 6 clocks found at the crime scene, a delicate mantel clock with an ornate brass face and Roman numerals. "We're trying to trace the origin of this clock, Mr. Finch. It was found at the scene, along with 5 others like it. Any chance you've sold something similar recently?" Finch adjusted his spectacles and studied the photo, his brow furrowing. After a moment, his face lit up with recognition. Oh, yes. I sold a set of 6 just like this not 2 weeks ago. Beautiful pieces, French, late 19th century. Not cheap. Mind you, the buyer paid in cash, which is unusual these days. Hardcastle leaned forward, his pencil poised. Can you describe the buyer? Finch tapped his chin, his eyes drifting to the ceiling as he recalled. A woman, middle-aged, I'd say, well-dressed, but how shall I put it? She had a certain intensity about her, kept her hat low, didn't say much. She asked specifically for clocks with a classic look, something that would make a statement. I thought it odd, but I didn't pry. Customers have their quirks. Colin's pulse quickened. Did she give a name? An address? Finch shook his head regretfully. No name, no address. She paid, took the clocks, and left. I assumed she was decorating a home, or perhaps buying, for a client. People in Crowdian are private, you know. Hardcastle exchanged a glance with Colin. Did she mention anything about Wilbraham Crescent or a Miss Pebmarsh? Not a word, Finch said. But I do remember one thing. She had a slight accent. Not strong, but noticeable. Could have been Eastern European, maybe Polish or Czech. Hard to pin down. As they left the shop, Colin's mind raced. 6 antique clocks, bought in cash by a mysterious woman with an accent. Not the work of a casual thief or a random killer. Bissoirs, deliberate, calculated. A piece of theatre designed to draw attention or deflect it. Back at the police station, Colin and Hardcastle pored over the evidence, the room lit by the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. The coroner's report. The RF. Note Mrs. Bland's vague sighting, and Finch's account of the clock buyer lay spread out on the table like fragments of a shattered mosaic. Let's piece this together, Colin said, pacing the room. Our victim is a well-dressed man, strangled, left in a house he had no business being in. No ID, just a note with RF6 antique clocks, bought 2 weeks ago, are arranged around him, all set to 4:13. Miss Pebmarsh claims she didn't. Request a typist, didn't own the clocks, and didn't know the victor. And now we've got Mrs. Bland's shifty man and Finch's mystery woman. Hardcastle rubbed his temples. It's a bloody mess, is what it is. The clocks are the key, though. Why go to the trouble of buying 6 expensive antiques just to leave them at a crime scene? Colin stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. Because they're not just clocks, they're a message. The time for 13 means something. And the fact that they're antiques suggests someone with money, or at least access to it. Hardcastle grunted. Or someone trying to make us think that. What about this RF note? Could be the victim's initials, or someone else's, Colin said. A lover. A business partner, an enemy. We need to cross-reference missing persons reports. See if anyone matching our victim's description has turned up. As Hardcastle reached for the phone to call. The records office. Colin's thoughts drifted to Sheila Webb. She'd been pale and trembling when he'd found her outside No. 19. Her eyes wide with shock. She was a typist, an ordinary young woman caught in an extraordinary trap. Why had she been sent to that house? And why had the killer or killers chosen her. Hardcastle, Colin said suddenly. We need to talk to Sheila again. She might know more than she realizes, and we need to check her agency. Someone sent her to that house, and I don't believe it was a coincidence. Hardcastle nodded, already dialing. Agreed. And while we're at it, let's have another chat with Miss Pebmarsh. Her story's too tidy for my liking. That evening, Colin sat in a quiet corner of the Crowdian Arms, a pint of ale untouched before him. The pub was half empty, its wooden beams and brass fittings glowing softly in the lamplight. He'd sent a telegram to Poirot, outlining the day's findings. The nameless victim, the RF, note, the antique clocks, and the mysterious woman with the accent. He could almost hear Poirot's voice, smooth and precise, urging him to look beyond the obvious, to seek the human truth beneath the elaborate facade. As he sipped his ale, Colin's thoughts turned to the neighbors on Wilbraham Crescent. Mrs. Bland's nervous chatter, her husband's dismissive grunts, Ramsay's guarded answers, his claim of being away on business. Miss Pebmarsh's calm denial, her blindness an enigma in itself. And then there was Sheila, her fear so raw it had lingered in the air like a scent. The door to the pub swung open, and a young woman slipped inside, her coat damp from the evening mist. It was Sheila Webb. She spotted Colin and hesitated, then made her way to his table. "Mr. Lamb," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I got your message. You wanted to see me." Colin gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down, Miss Webb. I won't keep you long. I just need to ask a few more questions about yesterday." She sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've told you everything I know. I got a call from the agency saying Miss Pebmarsh needed a typist at 2 p.m. I went, and I found that man." Colin studied her face, searching for any hint of deception. Her eyes were clear, but there was a flicker of something fear, perhaps, or guilt. "Who at the agency took the call?" "Sheila Martinez." She frowned, thinking. "It was Miss Martindale, I think. She's the one who assigns the jobs. But she didn't say much, just gave me the address and the time." Colin made a mental note to visit the agency first thing in the morning. "One more thing," he said. "Have you ever heard the initials RF? Maybe a client, a friend, someone at the agency?" Sheila shook her head, but her fingers tightened around her coat. "No, I don't think so." "Why?" "Just something we found," Colin said, keeping his tone light. "Don't worry about it. You've been through enough." Sheila stood, pulling her coat tighter around her. "Can I go now? I don't like being out after dark. Not after yesterday." "Of course," Colin said, rising. "I'll walk you home. It's no trouble." She hesitated, then nodded. As they stepped into the misty night, Colin couldn't shake the feeling that Sheila was holding something back, a secret, small but significant, that might unlock the puzzle of Wilbraham Crescent. The next morning, Colin and Hardcastle visited the Cavendish Secretarial Bureau, a small office above a bakery on the high street. The air was sweet with the smell of fresh bread, but the atmosphere inside the agency was tense. Miss Martindale, A sharp-featured woman in her 50s sat behind a cluttered desk, her lips pursed as she listened to their questions. "I don't know who called about the job for Miss Pebmarsh," she said, her voice clipped. "It was a woman. Said she was Miss Pebmarsh's secretary. I didn't think to question it. We get requests like that all the time." Colin leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. Did the woman have an accent? Maybe Eastern European? Miss Martindale's eyes narrowed. "Now that you mention it, yes. Slight, but there. I thought it was just a quirk." "Why? Is it important?" "It might be," Hardcastle said, jotting down the detail. "Can you check your records, see if you've had any other jobs for Wilbraham Crescent recently?" Miss Martindale sighed, but opened a ledger, her fingers flipping through the pages. After a moment, she shook her head. Nothing. This was the first job for that address in months. As they left the agency, Colin's mind was racing. A woman with an accent, posing as Miss Pebmarsh's secretary. The same woman who bought the clocks, or someone else, part of a larger scheme. And what about RF? The initials felt like a key, but to what lock? That afternoon, a constable burst into the station, his face flushed with excitement. "Sir," he said, addressing Hardcastle, "we've got something." A pawn-shop owner on the edge of town recognized the victim's description. Said the man came in a week ago, trying to sell a watch. Had a scar on his left hand, same as the coroner noted. Colin's heart skipped a beat. Did the owner get a name? The constable nodded, holding up a slip of paper. Not a name, but initials. The man signed the pawn ticket. R. Fowler. Hardcastle slammed his fist on the table. "RF. That's our man. Get on the phone. Check every database, every missing persons report. We've got a name more, at least part of one." As the station buzzed with activity, Colin stepped outside, lighting a cigarette as he stared at the overcast sky. R. Fowler, a man with a scar, a tailored suit, and a cryptic note in his pocket. The clocks, the impostor, the agency call it, was all connected, a web of deceit spun with chilling precision. And somewhere in Crowdian, the spider was waiting, watching, ready to strike again. He exhaled a plume of smoke, his resolve hardening. "We're coming for you," he muttered, "and when we do, your little game is over." Chapter 5. The Second Murder. The late afternoon sun hung low over Crowdian, casting long shadows across Wilbraham Crescent. The quiet suburban street, with its neat rows of semi-detached houses, seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the darkness creeping beneath its orderly facade. Colin Lamb, his trench coat flapping lightly in the autumn breeze, strode purposefully toward the small office of Cavendish Secretarial Agency, where Sheila Webb worked. His mind churned with the details of the case. The dead man at No. 19, the 6 clocks frozen at 4:13, and Miss Pebmarsh's unsettling denial of owning them. The puzzle felt like a knot he couldn't untangle, each thread leading to another snag as he approached the agency. A squat brick building tucked between a bakery and a chemist's shop. Colin's thoughts were interrupted by a piercing scream. From the alleyway to his left, his instincts, honed by years of covert work, kicked in. He sprinted toward the sound, his polished shoes skidding on the damp cobblestones. The alley was narrow, shadowed by high walls, and smelled faintly of stale bread from the bakery's bins. At its far end, a small crowd had gathered around a public telephone booth, its red paint glinting dully in the fading light. Out of the way, Colin barked, pushing through the onlookers a milkman, a woman with a pram, and a boy clutching by a football. Inside the booth, slumped against the glass, was a young woman, her head lolling at an unnatural angle. A silk scarf, garishly patterned with orange flowers, was knotted tightly around her neck. Her eyes, wide and lifeless, stared into nothingness. Colin's stomach lurched as he recognized her. Edna Brent, another typist from Sheila's agency. He knelt beside her, checking for a pulse, though he knew it was futile. Her skin was cool, her body rigid. The crowd murmured behind him, their voices a low hum of shock and curiosity. Colin's gaze darted to Edna's hand, curled loosely at her side. A torn scrap of paper protruded from her fingers, its edges jagged. He carefully pried it free, revealing a single word scrawled in hasty ink: clock. The weight of the discovery hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't a coincidence. Edna's murder was tied to the body at No. 19, to the clocks, to Sheila's discovery. His mind raced to Sheila, her pale face, her trembling hands. After finding the first victim, was she next? The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through him, and he stood, turning to the crowd. "Has anyone called the police?" he demanded. The milkman, a wiry man with a cap pulled low, nodded. "Constable's on his way, sir." Saw her through the glass and rang straight off. "Good. Nobody touch anything. Stay back." Colin's voice was sharp, authoritative, masking the unease gnawing at him. He scanned the alley, searching for anything out of place: a footprint, a dropped cigarette, a clue. The cobblestones were slick with recent rain, but nothing stood out. The killer had been careful. Minutes later, the wail of a siren announced Inspector Hardcastle's arrival. The inspector, a stocky man with a perpetually furrowed brow, climbed out of a police car, his notebook already in hand. He took one look, bet Edna's body, and swore under his breath. "Another one," he muttered, glancing at Colin. "You know her?" "Edna Brent," Colin said grimly. "Works with Sheila Webb at the Cavendish agency. Found her like this, with this in her hand." P held up the scrap of paper, careful to touch only its edges. Hardcastle's eyes narrowed as he read the word clock. "This is no random strangling. Someone's playing a game, and I don't like it one bit." Colin nodded, his jaw tight. "We need to get to Sheila, now. If this is connected, she's in danger." Hardcastle didn't argue. He barked orders to the constables securing the scene, then followed Colin as they hurried back to the agency. The short walk felt endless, each step heavy with dread. Colin's mind spun with questions. Why Edna? What did she know? And why the word clock? Was it a warning, a signature, or something else entirely? The agency's door was ajar when they arrived. The bell, above it, jingling faintly as Colin pushed it open. The reception area was cramped, with a chipped wooden desk and a typewriter that looked older than the building itself. Mrs. Curtin, the agency's manager, was sorting papers, her glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked up, startled, as Colin and Hardcastle burst in. "Where's Sheila Webb?" Colin asked, his voice urgent. Mrs. Curtin blinked, clutching a folder to her chest. "Sheila. She left about an hour ago. Said she had an errand to run. Didn't say where." Colin's heart sank. "Did she seem upset? Was anyone with her?" "No. She was alone. A bit distracted, maybe. But that's all." Mrs. Curtin frowned, sensing the tension. "Is something wrong?" Hardcastle stepped forward, his tone softer but firm. "We need to know exactly where she went. Any clients she mentioned. Any phone calls." Mrs. Curtin hesitated, then flipped open a ledger on the desk. "Let me check. She had no bookings this afternoon. But she did get a call earlier, around 2 o'clock. I didn't hear much, just her saying something about meeting someone at the pier." The pier. Colin exchanged a glance with Hardcastle. Crowdian's pier was a faded relic of the town's brief stint as a seaside resort, now mostly frequented by fishermen and teenagers skipping school. It was isolated, exposed, perfect place for an ambush. "Thank you, Mrs. Curtin," Hardcastle said, already heading for the door. "If she comes back, keep her here and call the station immediately." Colin was already moving, his mind racing. The pier was a 10-minute drive, less if they ignored the speed limit. As they climbed into Hardcastle's car, Colin's thoughts turned to Edna's lifeless body, the scarf around her neck, the word clock. The killer was bold, striking in broad daylight, leaving clues that felt like a taunt. This wasn't just murder, it was a performance. The drive to the pier was tense, the car's engine roaring as Hardcastle wove through Crowdian's narrow streets. Colin stared out the window, the town blurring past, pastel-colored shops, children playing in a park, an old man walking a dog. It all seemed so normal, so at odds with the violence unraveling beneath the surface. "Think Sheila's the target?" Hardcastle asked, breaking the silence. Colin's fingers tightened on the door handle. She found the first body. If Edna knew something about that, Sheila might too. Or the killer thinks she does. Hardcastle grunted. "Those clocks are the key. 6 of them, all set to 4:13. It's not random. Nothing about this is." Colin didn't respond. His mind was on Sheila, her quick smile, the way her hands shook when she recounted finding the body. He'd felt an unexpected pull toward her. From the moment they met, a mix of protectiveness and something he wasn't ready to name, if anything happened to her. They reached the pier as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. The wooden boardwalk stretched out over the gray sea, its planks weathered and creaking underfoot. A few fishermen stood at the far end, their lines cast into the water, but otherwise the pier was deserted. Colin's eyes scanned the shadows, searching for any sign of Sheila there. Hardcastle pointed to a figure near the railing, halfway down the pier. It was Sheila, her dark hair whipping in the wind, her coat pulled tight against the chill. She stood alone, staring out at the waves, oblivious to their approach. Colin's relief was short. As they hurried toward her, a shadow moved behind a stack of crates near the pier's entrance. It was fleeting, barely a flicker, but Colin's training kicked in. He grabbed Hardcastle's arm, pulling him to a stop. "Someone's there," he whispered, nodding toward the crates. Hardcastle's hand went to his truncheon, his eyes narrowing. "Stay with her. I'll check it out." Colin didn't argue. He broke into a jog, calling out, "Sheila." She turned, startled, her face pale in the dim light. "Colin." He reached her, grabbing her shoulders gently but firmly. "Are you all right? Why are you here?" I got a note," she stammered, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. "It said to meet someone here at 6. About the job at Miss Pepmarsh's." I thought. Colin took the note, his eyes scanning the typed words. "Meet me at the pier. 6 p.m. Important information about No. 19. Come alone. No signature, no clues to the sender." His blood ran cold. It was a lure, just like the call that had sent Edna to her death. "We need to get you out of here," he said, his voice low. "Now." Before Sheila could respond, a shout came from the crates. Hardcastle was grappling with a man in a dark coat, his face obscured by a scarf. The two men struggled, Hardcastle's bulk giving him the upper hand as he pinned the stranger against the crates. Colin pulled Sheila behind him, his eyes locked on the scene. "Stay close," he murmured, his hand hovering near the concealed knife in his coat. He wasn't armed like Hardcastle, but his training had taught pin to make do. Hardcastle yanked the scarf from the man's face, revealing a gaunt, middle-aged figure with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. The man's eyes darted wildly, but he didn't resist as Hardcastle cuffed him. "Who are you?" Hardcastle demanded. "What were you doing here?" The man said nothing, his lips pressed into a thin line. Colin stepped closer, studying him. The scar matched Geraldine's description from her opera glass spying, but something about the man's demeanor, nervous, almost panicked, didn't fit the profile of a cold-blooded killer. "Search him," Colin said. Hardcastle patted the man down, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. He flipped it open, his brow furrowing. "Names, dates, addresses. Looks like a ledger. And this." He held up a photograph of the dead man from No. 19. The same lifeless face Colin had seen sprawled among the clocks. Sheila gasped, clutching Colin's arm. "That's him. The man I found." Colin's mind raced. The scarred man wasn't the killer. He was a lead, maybe a witness. But the real danger was still out there. He turned to Sheila, his voice urgent. "Did anyone know you were coming? Here, anyone at all?" She shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, I didn't tell anyone. Just Mrs. Curtin when I left the office." Colin exchanged a glance with Hardcastle. The agency was the common thread, Sheila. Edna, the call, the note. Someone there was involved, or someone had access to their records. He made a mental note to dig deeper into Mrs. Curtin and the agency. Operations. Hardcastle hauled the scarred man to his feet. We're taking him in. You get Sheila somewhere safe. Colin nodded, his arm around Sheila's shoulders as he guided her back toward the car. Her trembling had returned, and he could feel her fear radiating through her coat. "You're all right now," he said softly. "I won't let anything happen to you." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "Why is this happening?" Colin first, that man, now Edna. "I don't understand." "I don't either," he admitted. "But I'm going to find out. I promise." They reached the car, and Colin helped her inside, his mind already turning to the next steps. The scarred man's notebook, the word clock, the note luring Sheila to the pirate was all connected. But the pattern was still out of reach. He needed to get to Hercule Poirot, to lay out the new pieces of the puzzle. The detectives' little grey cells were their best hope of making sense of this chaos. As Hardcastle drove them back to the station, the scarred man, silent in the back seat, Colin's thoughts returned to Edna. Her death had been swift, brutal, a message meant to be found. The killer was escalating, growing bolder, and Sheila, whether she knew it or not, was at the center of it all. At the station, Colin arranged for Sheila to stay in a guarded room, a temporary safe haven until he could sort out the next move. She sat on a narrow cot, clutching a cup of tea, her eyes distant. "I keep seeing her," she whispered. "Edna. She was so kind, always joking about her bad typing. Why would anyone?" Colin knelt beside her, his voice steady. "We'll find out, Sheila. I swear it. But you need to stay here, where it's safe. Can you do that?" She nodded, her fingers tightening around the cup. "Be careful, Colin, whoever's doing this. They're watching." Her words sent a chill down his spine, but he forced a reassuring smile. "I'm always careful." As he left the room, locking the door behind him, Colin's resolve hardened. Edna's murder had raised the stakes, but it had also given him a new lead: the scarred man, the notebook, the photograph. He would take them to Poirot, piece by piece, until the truth came into focus. The killer thought they could outsmart him, outsmart Poirot, but they were wrong. This was a game of wits, and Colin was determined to win for Edna, for Sheila, and for the justice that Hercule Poirot always delivered. The chapter closed with Colin stepping out into the night, the weight of the case heavy on his shoulders, but his determination unshaken. The word clock echoed in his mind, a ticking reminder that time was running out. But with Poirot's guidance and his own tenacity, he would protect Sheila and stop the killer before they struck again. Chapter 6. Shadows of espionage. The late afternoon sun cast long, jagged shadows across the streets of Crowdian, a sleepy coastal town whose quaint charm belied the dark currents swirling beneath its surface. Colin Lamb, his dark overcoat flapping in the brisk September breeze, strode purposefully toward the naval yard, his mind a tangle of questions. The murder at 19 Wilbraham Crescent, with its eerie tableau of 6 clocks frozen at 4:13, had already spiraled beyond a simple crime. The dead man, nameless and cryptic, clutched a note marked RF, a breadcrumb that gnawed at Colin's instincts as a covert agent. Now, with a second murder darkening the case, the stakes felt impossibly high. Sheila Webb, the typist who'd stumbled into this nightmare, was under his protection, but the killer's shadow loomed closer. Colin's work at the naval yard, a cover for his intelligence operations, offered a chance to untangle the threads or plunge him deeper into danger. The naval yard sprawled along the waterfront, its iron gates guarded by a dure sentry, who nodded at Colin's credentials. Inside, the air thrummed with the clatter of machinery and the shouts of workers. Cranes loomed like skeletal giants, hoisting steel beams for ships under construction. Colin's role as a technical consultant was a flimsy veneer, known to only a handful of superiors. His real task: track a missing codebook, a cipher key vital to naval communications. Its disappearance 3 weeks ago had sparked whispers of espionage, and now, with a corpse tied to Wilbraham Crescent, Colin suspected the two cases were entwined. He headed to the administrative block, a squat brick building dwarfed by the yard's industrial sprawl. Inside, Captain Hargreaves, a grizzled officer with a salt and pepper beard, waited in his office. Hargreaves was one of the few who knew Colin's true purpose. The captain's desk was cluttered with charts and memos, but his eyes were sharp, fixed on Colin as he entered. "Lamb," Hargreaves said, voice low, "you're late, and you look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost, sir," Colin replied, easing into a chair. "A second body. Edna Brent, a typist, strangled in a phone booth near Wilbraham Crescent. It's connected to the first murder. I'm sure of it." Hargreaves leaned back, his chair creaking. Bloody hell. And the first victim, still nameless. Middle. No papers, just a note with RF scribbled on it. The clocks at the scene, 6 of them, all set to 4:13, feel like a message. But I can't crack it yet. Hargreaves drummed his fingers on the desk. "And your codebook? Any leads?" Colin hesitated, choosing his words. "I'm starting to think the murder and the codebook are linked. The victim might have been a courier or a buyer. Wilbraham Crescent's too close to the yard for coincidence." Hargreaves' eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting a traitor's operating under our noses, or someone posing as a local," Colin said. "I need access to personnel records, to the cipher room, and I want to know who's been loitering near the yard the past month." Hargreaves nodded, scribbling a note. "I'll get you the records, but tread lightly, Lamb. If this is espionage, the killer's not working alone." Colin left the office, with a folder of restricted files tucked under his arm, his mind racing. The naval yard was a labyrinth of secrets, its workers a mix of loyal patriots and potential turncoats. The codebook's theft pointed to someone with inside access, someone who knew its value. But why stage a murder with such theatrical flair? The clocks, the cryptic note, they were taunts, designed to distract or mislead. Colin's gut told him the killer was playing a deeper game. His next stop was Wilbraham Crescent, a quiet street lined with tidy Georgian houses. No. 19, Miss Pebmarsh's home, stood silent, its curtains drawn. The blind woman's denial of Owning the clocks or hiring Sheila had been to pat her composure to unshakable. Colin circled the neighborhood, eyes scanning for anything out of place. At No. 20, Mr. Ramsay's house, a flicker of movement caught his attention. Ramsay, a widower with 2 young boys, had been oddly evasive when questioned by Inspector Hardcastle. Now, as Colin watched, Ramsay emerged, glancing furtively before hurrying down the street. Colin followed at a distance, his footsteps muffled by the evening mist rolling in from the sea. Ramsay's pace was brisk, his shoulders hunched as if carrying a weight. He turned onto a narrow lane leading to the town's old pier, a derelict structure jutting into the grey water. The pier was deserted, its wooden planks warped and creaking. Underfoot, Colin hung back, crouching behind a rusted bollard, as Ramsay stopped at the far end, lighting a cigarette. The flare of the match illuminated his face tense, almost hunted. A second figure appeared, emerging from the shadows. Tall and lean, the stranger wore a dark cap pulled low. Colin strained to hear their conversation, but the wind carried only fragments. Too risky now. The book's safe. No more mistakes. The stranger handed Ramsay a small package, then vanished into the fog. Ramsay pocketed the item and retraced his steps, unaware of Colin's pursuit. Back. At No. 20, Ramsay slipped inside, bolting the door. Colin lingered, his breath visible in the chill air. The exchange on the pier screamed conspiracy. But was Ramsay the killer, a spy, or both? The package could be the code book, something else entirely. Colin needed more before confronting him. He jotted down the encounter in his notebook, adding Ramsay to his growing list of suspects. The next morning, Colin visited Sheila at her boarding house, a modest Victorian building run by a nosy landlady, Mrs. Cobb. Sheila's face brightened when she saw him, but her eyes betrayed her. Fear over tea in the cramped parlor. Colin probed gently. Edna's death, he said, watching her closely. Did she ever mention anything odd at the agency? Clients, phone calls, anything? Sheila shook her head, her auburn hair catching the light. Edna was quiet, kept to herself. But she did say something strange last week. She overheard a man on the phone at the agency, asking about me. He didn't leave a name. Colin's pulse quickened. What did he sound like? Edna said he had an accent foreign, maybe. She thought it was a prank. Sheila's voice faltered. Colin, am I next? He reached for her hand, his touch firm. Not while I'm here. I've arranged for a plainclothes officer to watch. The house. You're safe, Sheila. Her smile was fragile, but grateful. Colin left with a renewed sense of urgency, his mind circling back to the accent. A foreign agent. The naval yard drew operatives like moths to a flame, and proximity made it a perfect staging ground. He needed Poirot's insight to make sense of the puzzle. At the post office, Colin sent a detailed telegram to Poirot's London flat, outlining the naval yard connection, Ramsay's suspicious behavior, and Sheila's revelation about the accented caller. He included profiles of key suspects. Miss Pedmarsh, whose wartime code-breaking past raised red flags. Mrs. Bland, whose sudden inheritance seemed too convenient, and Ramsay, whose peer rendezvous reeked of deceit. The telegram ended with a plea. Case growing murkier. Need your guidance. Back at the naval yard, Colin pored over the personnel records Hargreaves had provided. One name stood out: Victor Kessler, a clerk with access to the cipher room. Kessler's file noted a disciplinary action for irregular hours 2 months ago, around the time the codebook vanished. Colin tracked Kessler to the yard's canteen, a noisy hall filled with workers on lunch break. Kessler was a wiry man in his 30s, with nervous eyes and a habit of glancing over his shoulder. Colin approached, adopting a casual tone. "Victor, isn't it?" he said, sliding into the seat opposite. "I'm Lamb, technical consultant. Mind if I ask about the cipher room protocols?" Kessler stiffened, his fork pausing midair. "What's this about?" "Just routine," Colin lied. "Smoothly. Heard you're meticulous with the logs. Any odd visitors lately?" Kessler's gaze darted away. "No, nothing unusual. I keep the room locked, like always." Colin pressed, sensing weakness. "What about last month? Someone reported a stranger near the admin block." Kessler's face paled. "I don't recall. Look, I've got work to do." He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his tray, and hurried out. Colin watched him go, his suspicions deepening. Kessler's panic was telling, but without hard evidence. He was just another piece in the puzzle. The day stretched on with interviews and dead ends, each hour tightening the knot in Colin's chest. By evening, he returned to Wilbraham Crescent, drawn back to the crime scene like a moth to flame dart, as he passed No. 19. A faint noise stopped him, a metallic clink from the backyard. He crept along the side of the house, his hand on the revolver tucked inside his coat. The garden was dark, overgrown with ivy. A figure crouched near the shed, prying at the lock with a crowbar. Colin's voice cut through the silence. "Hands up, or I shoot." The figure froze, then stood slowly, hands raised. It was Ramsay, his face a mask of defiance. In his coat pocket, Colin found the package from the Pera, small, leather-bound book, but not the code book. It was a ledger filled with coded entries and dates. "Care to explain?" Colin said, his gun steady. Ramsay's jaw tightened. "It's not what you think. I'm no killer." "Then what's this?" Colin waved the ledger. "And who was your friend on the pier?" Ramsay hesitated, then sighed. "I'm freelancing. Smuggling, not spying. That ledger tracks shipments, cigarettes, whiskey, nothing military. The man on the pier's my contact." Colin's mind raced. Smuggling was a far cry from murder, but Ramsay's secrecy made him a liability. And the murder at No. 19. "You live next door. Seen anything?" Ramsay shook his head. "I keep my head down, but I heard Miss Pebmarsh arguing with someone a week ago. A man sounded angry. That's all I know." Colin lowered the gun, but his eyes stayed hard. "You're coming with me to the station. If you're lying, Ramsay, you'll regret it." At the police station, Inspector Hardcastle took Ramsay, put into custody, skeptical but willing to dig into the smuggling angle. Colin left, exhausted but restless, the ledger's coded entries nagging at him. Ramsay's story held water, but it didn't explain the clocks, the murders, or the codebook. The killer was still out there, and Sheila's safety hung by a thread. As midnight approached, Colin sat in his rented room, drafting a report for Poirot. The case was a labyrinth, each turn revealing new shadows. Ramsay's smuggling, Kessler's nerves, Miss Pebmarsh's past. The accented caller all pointed to a conspiracy rooted in Crowdion's quiet streets. The Naval Yard was the key, its secrets worth killing for. Colin's pen paused as a chilling thought struck him. What if the clocks weren't a distraction, but a countdown? To what he couldn't say, but the idea sent a shiver down his spine. He sealed the report, addressed it to Poirot, and stepped into the night to post it. The streets were empty, the sea's distant roar, the only sound. For a moment Colin felt the weight of the case lift, replaced by a steely resolve. Poirot would see the pattern he always did. Until then, Colin would keep digging, chasing shadows, until the truth emerged. The game was afoot, and he wouldn't rest until the killer's mask was torn away. Chapter 7. Poirot's first theory. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a soft golden glow across the polished mahogany table where he sat, his fingers steepled in thought. The room was a put sanctuary of order books, neatly aligned on shelves. A silver tea service gleaming on a sideboard, and a faint scent of lavender polish lingering in the air. Colin Lamb stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the bustling city beyond. His brow furrowed as he recounted the latest details of the Wilbraham Crescent case. The clocks, the corpse, the blind woman's denial it was a puzzle that seemed to twist in on itself, each piece defying a tidy fit. Poirot's eyes, sharp and green as polished jade, flickered with interest as Colin concluded his report. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a velvet murmur, "this affair of the clocks, it is not merely a crime, it is a performance, a stage set with precision. But for whom is this spectacle intended?" He leaned back in his armchair, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Tell me again of these clocks. There make their arrangement. Every detail, if you please." Colin paced, his hands clasped behind his back. 6 clocks, all set to 4:13, scattered around the body like some bizarre ritual. High-quality antiques, not the sort you'd find in a junk shop. Hardcastle's team traced them to a local dealer, but the trails culled no record of who bought them. Miss Pebmarsh swears she doesn't own them, and I'm inclined to believe her. She's blind, Poirot. What use would she have for clocks? She can't see. Poirot's smile widened, a glint of mischief in his eyes. What use, indeed? And yet the clocks are there, screaming their time for 13, toujours for 13. It is a message, Colin, a taunt, perhaps, or a distraction. He tapped his fingers lightly on the armrest. "You say the victim is still nameless, with only this RF note in his pocket?" Colin nodded. pulling a small notebook from his coat. Middle-aged, well-dressed. No identification. The note was scrawled on cheap paper, torn at the edges. Could be initials, a code, or just gibberish. The coroner's report says he died of a single stab wound, clean and precise, no defensive marks. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Precisement, Poirot murmured, his gaze drifting to the ceiling as if the answers were etched, binned in the plaster. This crime, it is so complicated, it must be quite simple. The clocks, the note, the body, they are the flourishes of an artist who wishes us to see only the surface. But beneath, there is a motive as old as time. Greed, revenge, fear perhaps, all three. We must strip away the theatrics, mon ami, and find the human heart at the center. Colin stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. You think the clocks are a misdirection? Mais oui. Poirot's voice rose, animated now. They are too perfect, too deliberate. 6 clocks, all stopped at the same hour, placed around a corpse in a house where no one claims them. It is a riddle designed to dazzle. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily dazzled. He leaned forward, his tone conspiratorial. I propose a theory, my friend. The clocks are not the key to the crime. They are the veil that hides it. The true motive lies elsewhere, in the lives of those who orbit this house at Wilbraham Crescent. You must look to their secrets: money, love, betrayal. These are the threads that bind. Colin scribbled a note, his mind racing. So, you're saying we ignore the clocks? Not ignore, Nan. Poirot wagged a finger. Observe them, yes, but do not let them blind you. They are a clue to the mind of the killer, not the heart of the crime. I wish you to investigate the neighbors, Colin, their finances, their histories. Who among them has gained recently? Who has lost? Money, it is often the silent partner in murder. Colin hesitated, then nodded. There's Mrs. Bland, a neighbor at No. 18. Hardcastle mentioned she inherited a tidy sum from a distant aunt a few months back. She and her husband lived comfortably, but there's something off about her. Too eager to help, maybe. Keeps offering tea and gossip to the constables. Bon Poirot clapped his hands, the sound sharp in the quiet room. This Mrs. Bland, she interests me. A woman who inherits a fortune is a woman with secrets, and secrets, they breed motive. Go, Colin, dig into her affairs, and those of the others. The blind Miss Pebmarsh, to her denial is too absolute to calm. And this typist, Mademoiselle Sheila, what of her? Colin's jaw tightened. She's shaken, but holding up. She swears she's never been to No. 19 before, and I believe her. She's not the type to get mixed up in something like this. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Ah, the heart speaks, does it not? Be careful, mon ami. A pretty face can cloud the judgment. Verify her story, too, and bring me every detail, no matter how small. Hercule Poirot will remain here in this chair, and solve this puzzle with the mind alone. Colin grinned, despite himself. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Immensely, Poirot admitted, his moustache twitching. Now go and return with the pieces of this mosaic. We shall see what picture they form. The train to Crowdion rattled along, its rhythm a steady counterpoint to Colin's racing thoughts. The countryside blurred past green fields dotted with sheep, hedgerows heavy with late summer blooms, but his mind was back at Wilbraham Crescent, replaying the crime scene. The body, the clocks, Sheila's wide-eyed panic as she stumbled into his arms. Poirot's words echoed, "The clocks are the veil." But a veil for what? Murder was rarely this theatrical without a purpose. Back in Crowdion, the police station buzzed with quiet efficiency. Inspector Hardcastle, a burly man with a perpetually skeptical squint, greeted Colin with a nod. "Lamb, you're back. Hope your fancy friend in London's got something useful. We've got nothing new on the victim. RF could be anyone, Robert Finch, Ronald Fowler, or just a red herring." Colin slid into a chair, dropping his notebook on the desk. "Poirot thinks the clocks are a distraction. He wants us to focus on the neighbors, especially their finances. Mrs. Bland's inheritance, for starters. Got anything on her?" Hardcastle raised an eyebrow, flipping through a file. "Catherine Bland, married to Ernest Bland. No children. Aunt died last spring. Left her £50,000. They've been splashing it around new car. Renovations on no. 18. Nothing criminal. But it's a lot of money for a couple who were scraping by before. Ernest works as a bank clerk, steady but not flashy. Catherine's a housewife, likes to play the gracious host." "Too gracious?" Colin asked, recalling her overly warm smiles. "Maybe," Hardcastle said. "She's been hovering around the investigation, asking questions, offering theories. Says she saw a man loitering near No. 19 the day before the murder. Described him as ordinary, which is bloody useless." Colin leaned forward. "Poirot thinks money's the key. Can we get a look at the Bland's finances? Bank records, recent transactions?" Hardcastle grunted. "Already on it. Got a warrant this morning. The bank's dragging its feet, but we'll have something by tomorrow. Meanwhile, we've got another angle. Miss Pebmarsh's neighbors say she keeps to herself, but she's been getting odd visitors lately. Men in suits, not local. Could be nothing, or could tie to your naval yard business." Colin's pulse quickened. His covert work at the nearby naval base had already hinted at espionage, missing codebook, whispers of a traitor. Could the murder be tangled in that web? "Any descriptions of these visitors?" Vague, Hardcastle admitted. "One neighbor, old Mrs. Curtin, swears she saw a man with a briefcase leaving Pebmarsh's house last week. Said he looked foreign. Probably just her imagination, but we're checking." Colin scribbled a note. "Poirot wants details on everyone around No. 19. I'll talk to Mrs. Bland myself, see if I can rattle her. And Sheila any chance she's mixed up in this?" Hardcastle shrugged. "Her story checks out. Typist at the Cavendish agency. Good reputation, no record. But she's nervous. Keeps looking over her shoulder. Could just be the shock of finding a body. Or someone's watching her," Colin said, his voice low. The thought of Sheila in danger sent a prickle down his spine. He pushed it aside, focusing on the task. "I'll start with Mrs. Bland. Then I'll check on Sheila, make sure she's safe." No. 18 Wilbraham Crescent was a tidy, semi-detached house, its garden bursting with roses and neatly trimmed hedges. Mrs. Catherine Bland answered the door in a floral dress, her smile as bright as the summer sun. "Mr. Lamb, what a surprise. Come in, please. Tea, biscuits." Colin declined politely, stepping into a parlor that smelled of fresh paint and lavender. The furniture was new, plush, and slightly ostentatious, stark contrast to the modest exterior. Just a few questions. "Mrs. Bland, about the day of the murder?" Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Of course, dreadful business. Poor man, whoever he was. I told the inspector I saw someone lurking near No. 19 the day before. A man in a grey coat, very ordinary looking." "Ordinary how?" Colin pressed, watching her closely. "Oh, you know," she said, waving a hand. "Medium height, medium build. Nothing stood out. I only noticed because he seemed to be watching the house." Colin nodded, jotting a note. "You've been very helpful to the police, Mrs. Bland. Always around, offering tea, insights. Almost like you're keeping an eye on things." Her laugh was light, but her eyes darted to the side. "Goodness, I just want to help. It's a quiet street, and this sort of thing, it's shocking. Ernest and I were just trying to be good neighbors." "Speaking of Ernest," Colin said, leaning back, "he must be pleased with your recent good fortune. The inheritance, I mean. New car, new furniture. Must feel like a fresh start." Mrs. Bland's smile tightened. "Oh, it's been a blessing, yes. My aunt was very kind. But money doesn't change who you are, does it? We're still the same. Old Blands." "Of course," Colin said, his tone neutral. "Mind if I ask what you were doing the morning of the murder?" "Just routine." She hesitated, then brightened. "I was here, tidying up. Ernest was at the bank. I did pop out to the shops around 10, but I was back by noon. You can ask Mrs. Curtin next door, she saw me come home." Colin made a mental note to verify that. One last thing. Those clocks at No. 19, never seen anything like them. Maybe at an antique shop or a friend's house. Clocks. She frowned, as if the question puzzled her. "No, can't say I have. Miss Pebmarsh isn't the sort for fancy decorations, is she? Being blind and all." Colin thanked her and left, his instincts buzzing. Mrs. Bland was too smooth, too quick with her answers. And that flicker in her eyes when he mentioned the inheritance, it wasn't fear, but something close. Guilt, greed. He needed those bank records. At the Cavendish Secretarial Agency, Sheila Webb sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the typewriter keys, but not striking them. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with worry. When Colin walked in, she jumped slightly, then relaxed. "Colin, you scared me." "Sorry," he said, pulling up a chair. "Just checking in. You holding up okay?" She managed a small smile, trying to. "It's just finding that man, those clocks. I keep seeing it when I close my eyes. And the police keep asking questions, like I'm hiding something. You're not, are you? Colin asked, keeping his tone light but watching her closely. Her eyes widened. No, I swear, I'd never been to that house before. I don't know why they sent me there. I believe you, Colin said, and he meant it. But Poirot's warning echoed. A pretty face can cloud the judgment. Look, Sheila, if you remember anything at all about that day, tell me, even if it seems small. She bit her lip, then nodded. There was one thing, when I got to know 19, the door was ajar, not wide open, just a crack. I thought Miss Pebmarsh left it that way for me, but now, I don't know. Colin's pulse quickened. Ajar. You didn't mention that to Hardcastle. I forgot, she said, her voice small. Everything happened so fast. He reached out, squeezing her hand briefly. It's okay. I'll pass. Bit along, and Sheila stay alert. If you feel like someone's watching you, call me. Day or night. She nodded, her eyes meeting his with a mix of gratitude and something deeper. Colin forced himself to stand, to focus on the case. But as he left, her face lingered in his mind, a quiet pull he couldn't quite shake. Back at the station, Hardcastle handed Colin a thin file. Preliminary bank records for the Blands. Nothing glaring, but there's a pattern. Large cash withdrawals over the past month. No clear explanation. And a deposit of £5,000, 2 days before the murder. Source unknown. Colin flipped through the pages, his mind racing. 5,000, right before a body shows up next door. That's no coincidence. There's more, Hardcastle said. We got a tip from a shopkeeper, says Mrs. Bland. Was asking about antique clocks a few weeks ago. Didn't buy any, just asked. Thought it was odd, since she's not the collecting type. Colin's heart thudded. Poirot was right. The clocks are a misdirection, but they're her misdirection. She's tied to this Hardcastle. I can feel it. Feelings don't convict, Hardcastle said, but his eyes gleamed. Get me proof. Lamb, and watch your back. If Mrs. Bland's involved, she's not working alone. That evening, Colin sat in a quiet pub, drafting a report for Poirot. The dim light cast shadows across his notebook as he wrote, detailing Mrs. Bland's inheritance, her odd behavior, the cash withdrawals, and the clock inquiry. The espionage angle still nagged at him. Mr. Ramsay's strange trips, Miss Peb, mysterious visitors, but Poirot's theory felt closer to the truth. The clocks were a flourish, a distraction from a simpler crime. Greed, perhaps, dressed up in theatrical trappings. As he sipped his pint, a shadow fell across the table. He looked up to see a man in a grey coat, his face half hidden by a scarf. "Mr. Lamb," the man said, his voice low, accented. "You're asking dangerous questions." Colin's hand tightened on his glass. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what's at stake," the man said. "Leave the clocks alone. They're not your concern." He turned and slipped into the crowd before Colin could react, heart pounding. Colin scribbled the encounter in his notebook. The case was closing in, the threads tightening. He sealed the report and mailed it to Poirot, knowing the little Belgian would devour every word. As he stepped into the cool night air, Wilbraham Crescent seemed to loom in his mind, its quiet houses, hiding secrets that were growing harder to ignore. The chapter drew to a close with Colin walking back to his lodging, the weight of Poirot's theory grounding him, Mrs. Bland's fortune, her lies, the stranger's warning. It all pointed to a truth buried in human nature, just as Poirot had said. The clocks were a mask, but the face beneath was starting to take shape. Chapter 8. The Child's Secret. The late summer sun hung low over Crowdian, casting long shadows across Wilbraham Crescent's tidy row of houses. The air was thick with the scent of mown grass and the faint hum of bees. But to Colin Lamb, the street felt like a stage where every window concealed a player in a deadly drama. He stood outside No. 19, his notebook heavy with questions, his mind heavier still. The case had grown thornier with each passing day. A nameless corpse, a blind woman's denial, 6 antique clocks frozen at 4:13, and now a second murderer. Typist strangled in a phone booth, a scrap of paper in her hand, whispering clock. The threads were there, but they refused to weave into anything coherent. Yet Gotkelin adjusted his hat, squinting against the glare. His covert work at the naval yard had stirred up whispers of espionage, but the human elements, the neighbors, their quirks, their secrets, kept tugging at him. Inspector Hardcastle had suggested canvassing the street again, but Colin's instincts pointed to one particular window, No. 18, where a 10-year-old girl named Geraldine Brown lived, confined to her apartment with a broken leg. She'd been mentioned in passing by Mrs. Curtin, the nosy widow at No. 20, who'd said the girl spent her days spying on the Crescent through opera glasses. Like a little hawk, that one, Mrs. Curtin had said, her lips pursed. Sees everything, says little. Colin crossed the street, his shoes clicking on the pavement. No. 18 was a modest, red-brick house with lace curtains and a slightly crooked mailbox. He knocked, and after a moment the door creaked open to reveal Mrs. Brown, a wiry woman with flour-dusted hands and a guarded smile. Her apron suggested she'd been baking, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Mr. Lamb, isn't it?" she said, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Inspector Hardcastle mentioned you might stop by. Something about the trouble at No. 19. "Exactly," Colin said, offering a disarming smile. "I'd like to speak with Geraldine, if she's up to it. I hear she's quite observant." Mrs. Brown hesitated, her fingers tightening on the cloth. "She's just a child, you know. Her legs kept her indoors, and she gets fanciful. I don't want her upset." "I'll be gentle," Colin promised. "Just a few questions. She might have seen something useful." Mrs. Brown sighed, then stepped aside. "Bump stairs, first door on the left, but don't let her spin you tales. She's got an imagination like nobody's business." The staircase creaked under Colin's weight as he climbed, the air growing warmer with each step. He knocked softly on Geraldine's door, and a bright voice called, "Come in." He pushed it open to find a small room bursting with color, walls plastered with drawings of dragons, ships, and lopsided houses, a bookshelf stuffed with dog-ear, adventure novels, and a narrow bed where Geraldine sat, her left leg in a plaster cast propped on a pillow. She was a slight girl with a tangle of auburn curls and eyes that sparkled with mischief. Beside her, on a wooden tray, lay a pair of opera glasses, their brass glinting in the sunlight streaming through the window. "You're the detective, aren't you?" Geraldine said, sizing him up. "Mum said you'd come. I'm Geraldine, but you can call me Gary. Everyone does." Colin grinned, pulling up a chair. "I'm Colin. Nice to meet you, Gary. I hear you've got the best view on the crescent." She puffed out her chest, clearly pleased. "Best in Crowdian, aye. To say these glasses belonged to my granddad. He used them at the opera. But I use 'em to watch the world, like a pirate spotting land." Colin chuckled, leaning forward. "And what's the world been showing you lately? Anything odd at No. 19? Jerry's eyes lit up, but she hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting her mother to barge in. "Promise you won't tell Mum I was snooping. She says it's rude." "Cross my heart," Colin said, tracing an X over his chest. Gary leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I saw something weird. A man with a scar right across his cheek, like this." She dragged a finger from her ear to her chin. "He was at No. 19, day before that typist lady screamed and ran out. He looked sneaky, like he didn't want anyone to see him." Colin's pulse quickened, but he kept his tone light. "Sneaky, huh? What was he doing? Slipping something under the door? A letter, maybe?" It was quick, and he kept looking over his shoulder. Then he hurried off toward the high street. She frowned, tapping her chin. "He wasn't from around here. I know everyone on the crescent." Colin scribbled in his notebook, careful not to betray his excitement. The scarred man was specific enough to be a lead, but vague enough to make him wary of Geraldine's flair for drama. What time was this? About 4 in the afternoon. The sun was behind the trees, so I had to squint. She pointed to her opera glasses. These helped, though. I could see the scar clear as day. "Anything else about him? Clothes, height, anything?" Gary scrunched her nose, thinking, tallish, I suppose. "Wore a grey coat, a bit shabby. Oh, and his hat was funny too big, like it didn't fit right. I thought he looked like a villain from one of my books. You know, The Secret of the Black Cove. There's a smuggler in it with a scar just like that." Colin suppressed a smile. "Sounds like quite a character. Did you see him again?" "Nope. Just that once." She hesitated, then added, "But there's something else. I didn't tell Mum, 'cause she'd say I'm making it up. The night before, I saw lights flickering in No. 19's garden, like someone was moving around with a torch. It was late past my bedtime." Colin's pen paused. "Flickering lights. You're sure it was No. 19? Gary nodded vigorously. "No, it was, 'cause I can see Miss Pebmarsh's rose bushes from here. They're the only ones with those big red flowers." The light kept bobbing, like someone was searching for something. Colin leaned back, his mind racing. A scarred man, a slipped letter, flickering lights in a blind woman's garden. Each detail was a puzzle piece, but the picture was still maddeningly unclear. Geraldine's account was vivid, but her love of adventure stories made him question how much was fact and how much was embellishment. Still, her confidence was infectious, and the specificity of the scar gave him something to chase. "You're a proper detective, Gary," he said, standing. "If you see anything else, you tell your mum to find me." "All right," she beamed, clutching her opera glasses. "I'll keep watch. Maybe I'll crack the case before you do." Colin laughed, but as he descended the stairs, his smile faded. Geraldine's story was a spark in the dark, but it raised more questions than it answered. Who was this scarred man? Was he the victim, the killer, or someone else entirely? And why would anyone be creeping around Miss Pebmarsh's garden at night? Mrs. Brown was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, her arms crossed. "Well, did she tell you one of her stories?" "She's got a sharp eye," Colin said carefully. "Might have seen something important. I'll need to check a few things." Mrs. Brown's expression softened, but worry lingered in her eyes. "She's a good girl, but she reads too many of those books, sees mysteries everywhere. Be kind if you come back. She's already got enough ideas." Colin tipped his hat. "I'll be discreet. Thank you, Mrs. Brown." Outside, the crescent was quiet, but Colin felt eyes on him, real or imagined. He couldn't tell. He walked to the corner, where a phone booth stood, its glass still smudged from the police's examination of Edna Brent's murder scene. He dialed Inspector Hardcastle, his voice low as he relayed Geraldine's account. "A scarred man." Hardcastle's voice crackled through the receiver. "That's new. Could be a drifter or someone playing a part. Kids, though, they mix things up. You think she's reliable?" "She's sharp," Colin said, "but she's 10 and loves a good yarn. Please still, the scar's specific. I want to check the local pubs, maybe the station. Someone might have seen him." Hardcastle grunted. "Worth a shot. I'll pull the files on any known felons with facial scars in the area." "What about the lights? Pew in the garden." "Could be nothing," Colin admitted. "Or it could be someone scoping the house before the body turned up. I'll talk to the neighbors again, see if anyone else noticed." "Keep me posted," Hardcastle said. "And watch yourself. This case feels off." Colin hung up, his gaze drifting back to No. 19. The house looked ordinary, its windows dark, but the image of flickering lights in its garden gnawed at him. He decided to take a detour before heading to the high street. Miss Pebmarsh's garden warranted a closer look. The back of No. 19 was accessible via a narrow alley, overgrown with nettles and shadowed by a sagging fence. Colin moved carefully, his torch casting a thin beam across the ground. The rose bushes Geraldine had mentioned were there, their red blooms drooping in the evening chill. He swept the light over the soil, looking for signs of disturbance, footprints, broken stems, anything near the base of a bush. He spotted a patch of earth that looked freshly turned, as if someone had dug and covered it hastily. Kneeling, he brushed the soil aside with his hand, revealing a small, glinting object, a cufflink silver with an engraved R. His heart skipped. The victim's cryptic note had read, RF. Could this be a match? He pocketed the cufflink, marking the spot in his notebook. It wasn't punch, but it was something tangible, a thread to pull. As he stood, a rustle in the bushes made him freeze. His hand went to the small knife he carried, a habit from his covert work. The sound stopped, and after a tense moment, a cat darted out, its eyes glowing in the torchlight. Colin exhaled, cursing his nerves. Back on the crescent, he headed for the high street where the pubs would be filling with the evening crowd. The scarred man was his best lead, and Crowdian wasn't so big that a stranger could go unnoticed. The first pub, the Red Lion, was a smoky den of chatter and clinking glasses. Colin ordered a pint to blend in, then struck up a conversation with the barman, a ruddy-faced man named Tom. Seen anyone new around? Colin asked, keeping his tone casual. Tall chap, grey coat, maybe a scar on his face. Tom frowned, polishing a glass. Scar, you say? There was a fellow in here, put a few nights back, kept his hat low, but I caught a glimpse of a mark on his cheek. Didn't talk much, just nursed a whiskey and left. Said he was passing through. Colin's grip tightened on his glass. Any idea where he went? Tom shrugged. Didn't say. But he paid with a crisp note, which struck me odd. Most folks round here use coins. Colin thanked him and moved on to the station, where the ticket clerk, a bored young woman, shook her head at his description. No one like that bought a ticket recently. I'd remember a scar. Frustrated but undeterred, Colin returned to his lodgings, a small room above a bakery. He spread his notes across the table, the cufflink glinting under the lamp. Geraldine's story had given him a lead, but had also raised the stakes. If the scarred man was real, he was a ghost in Crowdian, slipping through without a trace. And the cufflink car, was it the victims, the killers, or a plant to mislead? He dialed Poirot's number, the line crackling as it connected to the detective's London flat. Hercule Poirot, came the familiar voice, precise and warm. Colin here, he said, leaning back. I've got something. A girl on the Crescent saw a man with a scar at No. 19, day before the body was found. Said he slipped something under the door, and she saw lights in the garden the night before, someone with a torch. Poirot's silence was thoughtful, not dismissive. A child, you say? Children see what adults overlook, but they also embroider. This scars. It confirmed, not yet, Colin admitted. But I found a cufflink in the garden, marked with an R, matches the RF on the victim's note. Bon, Poirot said, his voice brightening. A cufflink is a clue of elegance. Nan. It suggests a man of means, or one who wishes to appear so. And this scarred man, perhaps he is the key, or perhaps he is the bait. You must verify the child's story, mon ami. Speak to the neighbors, but subtly, and the cuffling guard it well. I'm on it, Colin said. Anything else? Poirot chuckled. Only this. The truth is often hidden in what is not said. Listen to the silences, Colin. They speak louder than words. The call ended, and Colin stared at the cufflink, its silver surface catching the light. Geraldine's vivid account had opened a door, but it led to a maze. The scarred man, the flickering lights, the cuffling, they were pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. Yet Poirot's words echoed in his mind. The truth lay in the silences. As he prepared for another day on the Crescent, Colin felt the weight of the case settle deeper, but also a spark of determination. Geraldine's secret, fanciful or not, pours the thread he'd follow straight to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 9. The clockmaker's Cluth. The rain-slicked streets of Crowdian gleamed under the sodium glow of street lamps, a restless shimmer that mirrored Colin Lamb's mood as he navigated the narrow lanes toward the edge of town. The case at 19. Wilbraham Crescent had grown thornier with each passing hour, its tendrils snaking into corners he hadn't anticipated. 6 clocks frozen at 4:13, a nameless corpse, a blind woman's denial, and now a second murder. Edna Brent strangled in a phone booth with the word clock scrawled on a torn scrap in her hand. The weight of it pressed on him, not just as an agent, but as a man who'd seen Sheila Webb's terror and felt an unsettling pull to protect her. Colin's destination was a squat, ivy-choked shop tucked behind a row of shuttered warehouses. Tickenham's timepieces, the only lead on the antique clocks found at the crime scene. The shop's sign, faded and peeling, creaked in the wind, and its single window was so grimed with dust it seemed to guard its secrets as fiercely as the case itself. He glanced at his watch. 9:17 p.m. rapped on the door. The sound swallowed by the drizzle. No answer. He knocked again, harder, his breath fogging in the chill. Just as he considered forcing the lock, a faint shuffle came from within, followed by the scrape of a bolt. The door cracked open, revealing a stooped figure silhouetted against a weak flicker of lamplight. "We're closed," rasped a voice, dry as old parchment. "Mr. Tickenham, I'm Colin Lamb. I need to talk about some clocks you sold." Colin kept his tone even, though his pulse quickened. "It's urgent." The door widened reluctantly, and Colin stepped into a world suspended in time. The shop was a labyrinth of ticking mechanisms. Grandfather clocks loomed like sentinels. Mantel clocks cluttered every surface, and pocket watches glinted in glass cases. The air smelled of polished wood and machine oil, undercut by a faint The man before him, presumably Josiah Tickenham, was ancient, his face a map of wrinkles framed by wisps of white hair. His eyes, though, were sharp, darting over Colin with a mix of wariness and curiosity. "Clocks, you say?" Tickenham's voice was low, almost a whisper, as he shuffled to a counter strewn with gears and springs. "I sell many. Yours special." Colin pulled a photograph from his coat one Hardcastle had provided, showing the 6 clocks from the crime scene, elegant, ornate, their faces locked at 4:13. These were found at a house on Wilbraham Crescent. High-quality antiques, not the sort you see every day. "Ring any bells?" Tickenham's fingers, gnarled but steady, took the photo. He studied it, his lips pursing. For a moment Colin thought he'd deny everything, but then the old man's expression shifted, something like recognition, tinged with unease. "I I remember these. Sold M not 3 weeks ago. Fine pieces. French. Early 19th century. Not cheap. To whom? Colin leaned forward, his voice taut. Tickenham. Hesitated, glancing toward the shop's dark corners, as if expecting someone to emerge. A woman, said her name was Pebmarsh, paid in cash, no haggling. Unusual, that. Most folk try to talk me down. Colin's stomach tightened. Miss Pebmarsh, the blind woman who'd claimed no knowledge of the clocks or the typist. Sheila Webb. Describe her. Middle-aged, maybe 50. Dark hair, pinned up. Wore a grey coat, sensible shoes. Spoke crisp, like she was used to being obeyed. Tickenham paused, his brow furrowing. Had a scarf, green, with a bit of embroidery. I noticed 'cause it didn't match the rest of her, too. Lively. Colin's mind raced. The description didn't fit Miss Pebmarsh, who was older, play, and favored muted colors. Her blindness would have made navigating a cluttered shop like this tricky, too, unless she'd hidden it expertly. An impostor. He pulled out another photo, this one of Miss Pebmarsh, taken discreetly by Hardcastle's team. Was this her? Tickenham squinted, then shook his head. No, not her. This one's older, thinner. The woman I saw was sturdier. Face was rounder. Colin exhaled, the pieces shifting in his head. Someone had posed as Miss Pebmarsh to buy the clocks, planting them at the crime scene to what? Frame her. Misdirect the police. He needed more. Did she say why she wanted Bim, or where she was taking them? She said they were for a friend, a collector. Didn't give details. Seemed in a hurry. Kept checking her watch. Tickenham's eyes narrowed. Why's this matter? These clocks tied to something bad? Colin sidestepped the question. You said she paid in cash. Any chance you kept a record, a receipt, maybe? Tickenham snorted, a dry, humorless sound. Cash sales don't need receipts. Taxman doesn't need to know every penny I make. He paused, then added, almost grudgingly, but I noted it in my ledger. Habit. You see, wait here. He shuffled to a back room, leaving Colin alone with the relentless ticking. The shop felt alive, each clock a heartbeat, their faces glowing faintly in the dim light. Colin's gaze fell on a small, ornate clock on the counter. Its hands also stopped at 4:13. A coincidence. He reached for it, but Tickenham's voice stopped him. Don't touch that. The old man emerged, clutching a leather-bound book. His tone softened. It's sentimental. Belonged to my wife. Broke years ago. Stuck at that time. Colin nodded, filing the detail away. Tickenham opened the ledger, its pages yellowed and cramped with spidery handwriting. He traced a finger down a column. Here, October 12th, 6 French mantel clocks, sold for £180. Name given, M. Pebmarsh. No address. Anything else stand out about her? An accent, a mannerism. Colin pressed .tickenham, closed the ledger, his gaze distant. She had a ring, heavy gold, with a stone mirrored. Maybe, kept twisting it, nervous-like, and She asked if the clocks were loud. Said her friend didn't like noisy ones. I told her they'd been serviced, quiet as mice. Colin's mind snagged on the ring. A distinctive detail, something to trace. You've been a great help, Mr. Tickenham. If you remember anything else, contact Inspector Hardcastle at the Crowdian station. He handed over a card, then hesitated. One last thing. Ever hear of a man called R.F.? Initials, maybe a name. Tickenham's face shuttered. No, means nothing to me. But his fingers tightened on the ledger. A flicker of tension Colin didn't miss. Outside, the rain had eased, leaving the air sharp and cold. Colin lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the night as he processed the encounter. An impostor buying clocks under Miss Pebmarsh's name was a bold move, suggesting a plan far more intricate than a simple murder. And Tickenham's reaction to R.F., those initials found on the victim hinted at more than he'd let on. Was the clockmaker hiding something, or just spooked by the questions? Colin's next stop was the Crowdian Arms, a pub where Hardcastle had agreed to meet. The place was a warm contrast to the damp streets, its low ceilings and wood-panelled walls buzzing with locals nursing pints. Hardcastle sat in a corner booth, his broad face creased with fatigue, a notebook open before him. Anything but? Inspector asked as Colin slid in. Colin recounted Tickenham's story, emphasizing the impostor and the ring. Hardcastle's eyebrows rose. Not our Miss Pebmarsh, then. Someone's gone to a lot of trouble to point fingers at her. But why clocks? Why 6? All stopped at 4:13. Poirot thinks they're a distraction, Colin said, sipping the ale Hardcastle had ordered for him. A theatrical flourish to obscure the real motive. Tickenham's description gives us a new player, though. A woman, middle-aged, dark hair, green scarf, emerald ring. We need to cross-check that with the neighbors, see if anyone saw her near Wilbraham Crescent. Hardcastle jotted notes. I'll have my men canvass again. What about this R.F.? Tickenham, react to it. He clammed up. Could be nothing, but my gut says he knows more. Colin leaned back, the pub's hum fading, as his thoughts churned. There's another angle. Miss Pebmarsh herself. She's been too calm, too detached. I went back to her house before the shop, confronted her about the clocks. Hardcastle's pen paused, and she didn't budge on her story. No typist, no clocks, but she let something slip. During the war, she worked as a code breaker at Bletchley Park, kept it quiet all these years, said it was just clerical work, but her eyes told a different story. Hardcastle whistled softly. Code breaker. That ties her to your naval yard business, doesn't it? Missing codebook, espionage, rumors. Exactly. Colin's voice was grim. If the victim was mixed up in that, and someone's framing Miss Pebmarsh, the clocks might be a coded message themselves, a signal or a warning. The conversation was cut short by a commotion at the pub's entrance. A young constable burst in, rain-soaked and breathless. Inspector, you're needed at the station. It's Miss Webshe's there, hysterical. Says someone tried to run her off the road. Colin was on his feet before Hardcastle could respond. his heart lurching. Sheila. He grabbed his coat and followed the constable into the night. The pub's warmth replaced by a gnawing dread. The drive to the station was a blur, rain lashing the windshield as Colin's mind raced. Sheila targeted again. Was it the imposter, the killer, or someone else entirely? At the station, Sheila sat in a cramped interview room, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale but composed. Her dark hair was damp, clinging to her cheeks, and her hands trembled around a mug of tea. Colin's relief at seeing her unharmed ward. With a surge of protectiveness, "Colin," she said, her voice shaky but steadying at his presence. "I'm sorry, I didn't know who else to call." "Tell me what happened," he said, pulling a chair close. Hardcastle lingered by the door, giving them space. She took a breath. "I was driving back from my aunt's in Dover. It was dark, the roads empty. Then I saw headlights behind me, getting closer. I thought they'd pass, but they didn't. They sped up, swerved, like they wanted to hit me. I pulled onto the shoulder, and they kept going. But I saw the driver, just for a second, in my mirror." Colin's pulse quickened. "What did you see?" "A woman. Dark hair, I think. She was wearing a scarf green, bright. I couldn't see her face clearly, but she was staring at me, like she wanted me to know she was there." The room went quiet. The only sound Sheila's uneven breathing. Colin exchanged a glance with Hardcastle. The green scarf, the dark hairet, matched Tickenham's description. The impostor was no phantom. She was active, dangerous, and now targeting Sheila. "Did you get a look at the car?" Hardcastle asked. "Blue, maybe navy. A saloon, older model. I didn't catch the plates." Sheila's voice wavered. "Colin, why me? I don't know anything about those clocks or that man." Colin took her hand, his grip firm. "We're going to find out. You're safe here. I'll make sure of it." To Hardcastle, he added, "We need a patrol on her street, and I want that car tracked down. Blue saloon, green scarf. Incrowdian must have seen it." Hardcastle nodded, already moving to issue orders. Colin stayed with Sheila, his mind a storm of questions. The impostor's attack on Sheila wasn't random. It was a warning, or a desperate attempt to silence her. But why? Sheila's only connection was stumbling into that corpse. Unless she'd seen something she didn't yet realize. As Sheila sipped her tea, Colin's thoughts drifted to Poirot, tucked away in his London flat, sifting through the case with those relentless grey cells. He needed to update him, but first he had to ensure Sheila's safety. "I'm taking you to a hotel," he told her. "Somewhere quiet, out of town. No one will know you're there." She nodded, exhaustion etching her features. "Thank you, Colin. I trust you." The words hit him harder than he expected, stirring something he wasn't ready to name. He pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. As they left the station, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming like a dark mirror. Colin scanned the shadows, half expecting the blue saloon to emerge, but the night was still dot at the hotel. A modest in Oncrowdian's outskirts, Colin checked Sheila in under a false name. He lingered in her room, checking the locks, the windows, until she gave him a faint smile. "You're worse than my mother. Someone's got to be," he said, matching her tone, but not her lightness. "Get some rest. I'll be back by the morning." Back in his car, Colin drove toward Wilbraham Crescent, unable to shake the case's grip on him. The impostor's boldness gnawed at him. She'd risked exposure to scare Sheila, which meant the stakes were higher than he'd thought. He parked a block from No. 19, the house dark and silent, its secrets locked within. On impulse, he walked to the garden gate, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The garden was overgrown, roses tangled with weeds, but something caught his eye glint in the dirt. He crouched, brushing aside leaves to reveal a small gold object, a ring, heavy, set with a green stone, an emerald, or a convincing fake. His breath caught. Tickenham's words echoed. She had a ring, heavy gold, with a stone mirrored. Maybe, had the impostor been here, careless enough to lose it? Or was it planted? Another misdirection. Colin pocketed the ring, his mind racing. He needed to get it to Hardcastle for Prince. But first, he had to confront Miss Pedmarsh again. Her codebreaker past, her calm denial, it all circled back to her. Was she a victim, a pawn, or something more? Dawn was breaking as Colin reached her house, the sky a bruised purple. He knocked, expecting resistance, but Miss Pedmarsh opened the door almost at once, her sightless eyes fixed somewhere past him. "Mr. Lamb," she said, her voice cool. "I heard your car. You're persistent. I need answers," he said, stepping inside. The house was as tidy as before, no trace of the chaos that had unfolded here. "Someone bought those clocks using your name. By a woman, not you. Dark hair, green scarf, emerald ring. Know anyone like that?" Her face didn't change, but her hands, resting on her cane, tightened. "No, I've told you. I know nothing of clocks or typists." "Then why's your past coming up now?" Colin's voice was sharp. "Bletchley Park code-breaking. You didn't think that was worth mentioning when a man was found dead in your parlor." Miss Pedmarsh's lips thinned. "My work during the war is irrelevant. I was a typist, nothing more. Young men like you see spies everywhere." "Then explain this." Colin held up the ring, though she couldn't see it. "Found in your garden. Matches the description of the woman who bought the clocks. Care to guess how it got there?" For the first time, a flicker of something surprise perhaps crossed her face. "I don't know," she said, but her voice was less certain. "If someone's using my name, planting evidence, they're trying to ruin me. But I can't help you identify her." Colin studied her, searching for a crack in her composure. "What about RF? Those initials mean anything to you?" She shook her head, but the pause before her answer was a beat too long. No. He didn't believe her, but pushing further now would yield nothing. "If you remember anything, call me, day or night." He left the ring heavy in his pocket, Miss Pedmarsh's silhouette framed in the doorway as he walked away. Back at his flat, Colin collapsed onto the sofa, exhaustion warring with adrenaline. The case was a not each thread clock's impostor. Codebreaker, RF tangling into the next. He dialed Poirot's number, the line crackling as it connected. Mon ami Poirot's voice was warm, alert, despite the hour. You sound as if the world is heavy on your shoulders. Tell Poirot everything. Colin recounted the night Tickenham's story, the impostor's description, Sheila's attack, the ring, Miss Pepmarsh's revelation. Poirot listened, interjecting only with soft hums of interest. When Colin finished, the detective's voice was crisp. The clocks, they are the key, but not in the way you think. This impostor, she is clever, but careless, losing a ring, attacking Mademoiselle Webb. She is desperate, perhaps, or provoked, and Madame Pepmarsh, her past is no coincidence. You must dig deeper into her war years, Colin. Bletchley Park holds secrets, and secrets are dangerous. What about the ring? Colin asked. Could it be a plant? Possible, but unlikely. A ring is personal, not easily parted with. Find its owner, and you find your impostor. As for RF, it is a shadow, a whisper. Trust your instincts. Mon ami, they have led you this far. Colin hung up Poirot's words, a lifeline in the chaos. He stared at the ring, its emerald catching the light. The clockmaker's clue had opened a door, but beyond it lay a maze of motives and masks. As sleep finally claimed him, Colin knew one thing. The truth was closer, but so was the danger.